This isn't just a crime story, it's a psychological war, a carefully orchestrated setup built on intimate knowledge of habits, routines, and trust. Every move is deliberate, every detail is precise. But the most disturbing part, the enemy isn't a stranger, it's someone who watched, learned, and waited from inside the family.
My morning began when my front door splintered open at 6:47 a.m. A police officer screamed, "Show me your hands," as two firearms pointed at my chest. I was being taken in for attempted murder, a lie that would completely destroy my life. Somewhere else, my own family was likely having a celebration. They figured their 90-day scheme was a success and I would go to jail for a crime my sister committed. The cold steel of the handcuffs dug into my wrists. But they had overlooked one small, vital piece of information. That single detail was about to bring their entire plot crashing down. I am so happy you are here for this. Let me ask you a question. Where do you live? And how would you react if your sister set you up? Would you feel betrayed, angry, or just numb? Let me know in the comments below. Please know that this story is a work of fiction. Any familiar names or locations are only a coincidence. But the message about dealing with a destructive family is completely real. Let us begin. Officer Stevens did not even try to knock. My apartment door rattled from three hard smacks at exactly 6:47 in the morning. That was not a package delivery. That was the sound of a person who does not require an invitation to come inside. I was in the middle of pouring coffee when my entire reality shattered. The coffee pot was frozen in my grip. Through my window, the rainy street was still cloaked in darkness. The Austin skyline was just a silhouette against the mist. It was the Austin Police Department. My hand trembled, sending hot coffee splashing across the countertop. I set the pot down carefully. My heart began to pound against my ribs. I was dressed in nothing but a faded University of Texas t-shirt and pajama pants. My bare feet were silent on the hardwood floor as I moved toward the entrance. I was just able to call out, "I am coming." The second my hand touched the doorknob, the door exploded inward. Three officers flooded into my apartment. Two Glock 22 handguns were aimed at me. "Hands where I can see them." I threw my hands up immediately with my palms facing them. The officer in charge was young, perhaps 30 years old, with a military-style haircut and a grim expression. His name tag read Stevens. Behind him, his two partners scanned the room. Their weapons were raised, anticipating a conflict. "Are you Reagan Sutton?" Stevens's tone was ice cold. "Yes. What is this all about?" "You are being arrested for attempted murder." His words felt unreal. Attempted murder? It was like he was speaking a foreign language. I felt like I was caught in a horrible nightmare. "What? That is impossible. I have not—" "Turn yourself around. Place your hands behind your back." Stevens offered me no time to process anything. He seized my arm, slammed me against the counter, and twisted my arms behind me. The cold metal bit into my wrists. The handcuffs made a loud clicking sound. The noise echoed through my small apartment. "You have the right to be silent," Stevens said. I could feel his warm breath on my neck. "Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to a lawyer. If you do not have money for an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights?" "Yes, but this is a mistake. What attempted murder? I never left my home." "You can explain that to the detective." He pulled me by the arm and guided me toward the open doorway. My neighbors were all peeking out of their apartments. Mrs. Miller from apartment 4B had her hand over her mouth. Marcus, who lives across the hall, was filming me on his cell phone. It was an awful walk of public humiliation. I was being judged before a single charge had been filed. Stevens walked me down the corridor, past the out-of-order elevator, and into the emergency stairwell. My bare feet felt the chilly, gritty concrete as we descended 3 flights of stairs. I forced myself to observe every detail. I noticed the firm grip Stevens had on my arm. I saw the blinking red light from his partner's body camera. I saw how they treated me as if I was some kind of monster. That realization sent a shiver down my spine. We exited into the building's parking garage. A police cruiser was waiting with its engine humming in the damp air. Stevens pulled open the rear door. A heavy wire mesh separated the front seats from the back. He pressed my head down as I slid inside. The door slammed with a heavy final thud. I was trapped inside a police car. The hard plastic seat felt terrible. The cuffs were cutting into my skin and my shoulders were already starting to ache. Through the mesh, I could see Stevens talking on his radio. "We have the suspect in custody. We are en route to the central station." A suspect. That is who I was now. I shut my eyes and focused on taking slow breaths. Attempted murder. But who? When did this happen? And where? I had been in my apartment all night. I had a video conference at 10 o'clock at night with clients based in Singapore. After that, I streamed a movie on Netflix. I must have fallen asleep right on my sofa. I woke up around 6:30 and started making coffee. There was no missing time in my evening, no strange blank spots in my memory. This could only mean one of two things. Either the police had made a terrible error or someone had set me up. Stevens put the car into drive. The other two policemen followed us in a separate car. I watched the garage door rise, revealing a cloudy morning. The city of Austin was slowly coming to life. A few joggers were running along the river. A breakfast taco truck was opening its window. A man was walking his dog. Everything outside looked so normal. But inside this vehicle, my world was being torn apart. We drove onto Cesar Chavez Street and went toward the downtown area. I watched my apartment building get smaller in the side mirror. All of my evidence was back there. My computer, my cell phone, and the files that could prove my innocence were all in that apartment. They did not even let me get my wallet. My mind was racing. You cannot be arrested for a crime like this unless there is a victim. Someone had been hurt, and the police were convinced that I was the one who did it. As I looked at the morning skyline, a single thought cut through the chaos. The person behind this had made a huge miscalculation. They assumed that I am weak. They are about to learn just how wrong they are. They have no idea who they are dealing with. They do not understand what I do for a living. I have a career in cybersecurity. I am paid to solve very difficult problems. My job is to find the vulnerabilities in highly protected digital systems. I am able to trace the electronic footprints that people believe have been erased forever. And I will find out who is trying to destroy my life. Our car merged onto Interstate 35, where traffic was already building up. The police scanner crackled with codes and language I did not understand. I saw my own reflection in the window glass. My hair was a complete disaster. I was wearing my old college t shirt and the handcuffs were glinting. I looked exactly like the criminal they thought I was. But I am not a criminal. I reviewed the facts one more time. Last night, I had a 9 o'clock video conference. I could prove it with recorded files and digital records. My clients in Singapore would confirm my story. At 10 o'clock, I watched a movie. I fell asleep. I woke up at 6:30. My alibi was solid. So why was I in the back of this police car? Then the answer struck me with absolute certainty. It is because someone wanted me in this exact situation. This was a carefully planned event. Someone knew just what to do to make me appear guilty. The only things I did not understand were who did this and why. Stevens exited the highway and headed for the city center. I could see the Travis County Courthouse from the window. The police headquarters was just beyond it. It was a boxy, concrete building that looked like it was built in the 1970s. It was a cold, functional place where human lives were processed like paperwork. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. This was not a bad dream. This was my new reality. In just 15 minutes, I would be officially processed, fingerprinted, and photographed. I would be entered into the system as if my guilt was already a fact. But I refused to let panic take over. Panic is a complete waste of energy. I had to remain totally focused. I would need to use every single one of my skills, and I would demonstrate that I was framed, because that is what this was, a frame up. It was a setup so perfectly executed that the Austin Police Department showed up at my home with their guns drawn, certain they had found their suspect. Someone was incredibly smart. It must have been a person who knew me well enough to understand my daily routine, my habits, my entire life. That thought sent an icy chill through me. Stevens pulled into the station's underground parking area. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead flickered on. He stopped the car and shut off the engine. The resulting silence was heavy and suffocating. This was really happening. He opened my door and helped me get out of the car. His grip was surprisingly gentle now, a stark contrast to his earlier roughness. I just stood there on the cold concrete in my bare feet and pajamas, hands bound behind my back as he called in our arrival. "The detective will speak with you in about an hour," Stevens explained, his voice much softer than before. "But first, we have to get you processed." I could only manage to nod. I did not trust myself to speak. As he led me to the station's heavy steel doors, I made a silent vow. I will find out who did this to me. I will prove my innocence, and I will make the person who tried to ruin me regret ever being born. I could not have known it then, but the architect of my downfall was the very person I had spent my entire childhood protecting. The 15-minute drive to the station had felt like an eternity. My wrists were already turning a deep shade of purple from the cuffs. With every jolt on Cesar Chavez Street, the handcuffs bit into my wrists. I shifted on the hard plastic seat, but there was no escape. Through the mesh cage, I saw Austin coming to life. People bought tacos and went on morning runs, just living their day. A few moments ago, I was one of them. The police radio suddenly came alive. Unit 47, the victim is stable at Del Seaton. Her husband, a detective from Major Crimes, is with her. My stomach dropped. A victim whose husband was a cop. In the rearview mirror, Officer Stevens met my gaze. You heard that? A detective's wife and kid? He let the words hang in the air. You really picked the wrong people to mess with. But I did not do anything, I whispered. He was not listening. We pulled up to the station on 8th Street, a fortress of concrete and steel bars. Inside the garage, the fluorescent lights hummed with an intense buzz. Stevens guided me through a heavy door into a hallway that smelled of harsh chemicals. The booking room was vast and cold. A woman in her 50s, Martinez, sat behind a high counter. She did not even glance up. Name? She asked, her voice flat. Reagan Sutton, Stevens answered for me. She pecked at the keyboard with a single finger. Date of birth? Stevens rattled off my personal information, reducing me to a case file. The charges are attempted murder, assault, hit and run, and child endangerment. Martinez finally looked at me, her face full of contempt. Endangering a child, a 7-year-old? She repeated. Let us go get your fingerprints. A technician first pressed my fingers onto a cold glass scanner. Next, a camera flashed for my mugshot as I stood against a stark white wall. I had to hold a small board with my name and a long string of numbers. They had already taken everything from my pockets. I was left with only my sleeping clothes. Put her in holding cell 3, Martinez ordered Stevens. We proceeded down a long corridor flanked by cells. I saw a man sleeping in one. I could hear a woman crying somewhere close by. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and fear. Cell 3 was a simple box made of concrete. Stevens removed my handcuffs and motioned me inside. The detective will be down to see you shortly, he said. The heavy steel door clanged shut, the sound echoing off the bare walls. I lowered myself onto a frigid metal bench. The small space felt like it was shrinking around me. It was maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with no view of the outside. A single light fixture buzzed over my head. Jennifer Pfizer. The name from the police report echoed in my mind. It felt strangely familiar. I went through a mental list of everyone I knew, but no one had that name. I simply did not know any Jennifer Pfizer. Then a chill went down my spine. I recalled Detective Robert Pfizer from the Major Crimes Division. His name had been all over the news during a major case. The victim was his wife, and their young child was with them. A powerful wave of terror washed over me. If the victim was a detective's wife, the entire Austin police force would be against me. My alibi would be worthless. Cops protect their own, and I was their new enemy. I had to ignore the fear and start thinking. At 9 o'clock the previous night, I was in a video conference with my team in Singapore. Marcus Taylor and Patricia Reed were both on the call. The entire meeting was recorded, complete with video and timestamps. It was the best possible proof of my innocence. So why was I sitting in a jail cell? I heard the sound of footsteps approaching my cell. A detective in a blazer appeared outside the bars. She looked to be in her 40s with tired eyes. Miss Sutton, she said, your bail has been posted. I could only stare at her, completely baffled. What are you talking about? Your father's lawyer, a Mr. Gregory Palmer, is waiting for you. The bond was set at $500,000. 500,000 paid by my father. The information was truly shocking. I had not been allowed to make a phone call. I was arrested just an hour before. How could he possibly know? I never contacted him, I explained to her. She simply shrugged her shoulders. He called the station directly. He said he was aware of the situation. She unlocked the cell door. You are free to leave. Your hearing is scheduled for Friday. But who could have told him? I asked again. I honestly have no idea. A neighbor, perhaps. She led me down the hallway. Mr. Palmer is waiting in this room. A neighbor would call my father at 7 in the morning, and my dad, who I had not spoken to in months, would hire Austin's best lawyer and pay $500,000. The detective pointed me into a small room. A man in a very expensive suit stood to greet me. Miss Sutton, he said in a measured tone, my name is Gregory Palmer. I was retained by your father. I looked him right in the eye. How did my father know that I was in jail? Mr. Palmer offered a smile that did not feel genuine. I am afraid that bad news has a way of traveling fast. This whole case involves a detective's family. I was taken into custody at 7 this morning. It was not public information yet. Your father is a man with many connections, the lawyer explained. We need to get you home. I need to know how he found this out. Mr. Palmer's voice turned more serious. You are facing 4 felony charges. The prosecutor is going to push for a very long prison sentence. Our attention must be on your defense, not on your father's methods. My phone buzzed on the table. Martinez had just given it back to me. The screen lit up with 47 missed calls. My father, Wallace, had sent texts demanding I come to his house. My mother, Margaret, sent one that read, "Paige is distraught. You need to come home." I read her message a second time. Paige is distraught. My own sister. How could she possibly be upset? No one was aware that I had been arrested. I had not had a chance to tell anyone. "Miss Sutton?" Palmer said, studying my reaction. "I need to go to my apartment," I told him. "I have to get my computer to understand this. Your father has requested a family meeting at his residence. I will be there this evening. I must retrieve my personal items from my apartment first." Palmer did not seem happy with my answer. "Your father was extremely specific about his wishes." I stood my ground. "And I am being extremely specific about going home first." I got up to leave the room. "I appreciate you arranging the bail. I will contact you later." I walked out before he had a chance to argue. The bright morning sun was painful after being in the dark station. It was a warm September day in Austin. I was on the courthouse steps, released from jail but certainly not free. I had a sinking feeling that something was very, very wrong. My father knew about my arrest almost as soon as it happened. A message from my mother said my sister Paige was having a breakdown, but Paige should not have known anything. I pulled out my phone and launched my home security camera application. I had to check the recorded video from last night. I had to see for myself what took place while I was sleeping. As the application opened, my blood turned to ice. An unauthorized person had accessed my account at 3:14 in the morning. The login came from an internet address I recognized immediately. It was from Westlake Hills, which is exactly where my parents have their home. Gregory Palmer was the kind of lawyer my father would choose. He wore a costly suit and had cold, calculating eyes. The air conditioner was running high in the small room. I shivered in my thin sleepwear, feeling the new bruises on my wrists. Palmer looked like he belonged on a corporate board, a man with the scent of old money. That is what he was, a professional hired to make big problems disappear. He pushed a folder across the table towards me and said, "Your father called me at 7 o'clock this morning. Your bail was $500,000. It has been paid. You can go home now." I just looked at the folder, making no move to take it. How did he know? Palmer managed a well-practiced smile. Information moves quickly in Austin, particularly when it involves a police detective's family. They took me into custody at 7. I have been here for less than 2 hours. This is not on the news yet. Your father has his resources. Resources that informed him I was arrested at my apartment at 6:47 this morning. I leaned forward. He knew before anyone outside this police station knew. Palmer's artificial smile finally vanished. "I am not certain how your father received his information," he said. "The important thing is that he took action to secure your release." "Why?" The single word hung in the air between us. Palmer studied my face for a moment. "Because you are his daughter. We have not spoken in 3 months. Family is still family, Miss Sutton." Palmer finally opened up the file. "Now, we need to discuss a strategy. You are facing 4 extremely serious charges. They include attempted murder, assault with a weapon, a felony hit and run, and child endangerment. The district attorney is not going to show any mercy. The victim is Detective Robert Pfizer's wife. Their 7-year-old daughter was in the car at the time." My stomach felt like it was tied in a knot. A 7-year-old girl. I am innocent. That is what we must demonstrate. But as it stands, the evidence is pointing directly at you. He pulled out a sheet of paper. "They recovered your driver's license from the scene of the accident. An anonymous 911 caller reported seeing you flee the area. We have to verify your alibi, locate witnesses, and challenge their evidence." "What 911 call?" Palmer checked his notes. "The call was received at 9:27 last night. The person on the line described a woman matching your appearance running from the corner of Lamar and 6th. 9:27. That was only 10 minutes after the accident." "Who made the call?" "It was an anonymous tip," he replied, "and that is a major problem for us." My head was swimming. An anonymous tip is impossible to trace. It was made by a person who needed to stay hidden. A person who... "Miss Sutton?" Palmer was watching me with concern. "Do you have an alibi for last night?" "Yes, I was on a video conference call with my clients from Singapore. The call ran from 9 to 10 o'clock in the evening. The entire meeting was recorded with both video and timestamps." "Can anyone verify you were home after 10? He asked. I shook my head no. He explained that this created a window of opportunity. Palmer scribbled a note on his pad. "The crash occurred at 9:14. He said my video call began at 9. which meant I was on camera. That is extremely helpful for your defense. We can use it, he said. I was on camera for the entire hour. I never left my apartment. We are going to need a copy of that recording, he insisted. We also need to find out how your license ended up at the crash scene. I opened my mouth to speak, but then I stopped. How could my license be there? I was certain that I had lost it 2 months ago. I need my laptop, I told him. All of my work is on it back at my apartment. Palmer simply nodded. Your father wants you to come to his house first. He is holding a family meeting. The casual way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. How did my father even know what was happening? I am sorry, I said. Did you say he wants me at the house? Is that a direct order from him? Palmer's expression remained blank. Your father is concerned about you. He wants you safe and needs everyone on the same page. Please let him know I will be there tonight, I replied. I have to go home and make sense of this first. Palmer's jaw tightened. Your father was very specific. He wants you in Westlake immediately. The way he said wants sounded like a command. I rose from my chair. Thank you for handling the bail. I will be in touch. Miss Sutton, I must strongly advise you to. I cut him off. I will call you later. I walked out before he could say another word. The clerk at the front desk handed me my personal items in a large brown envelope. Inside were my phone, my wallet, and my keys. My phone's battery was completely drained. I had to find a charger and wait 10 minutes for the device to power on. The moment it did, my screen flooded with notifications. I had 47 missed calls. There were messages from people I knew and from some I did not recognize. I began to scroll through the list. My father, Wallace, had texted, Stay calm, do not talk to anyone, come to Westlake. He sent it at 7:14 this morning, only 30 minutes after my arrest. My mother, Margaret, had messaged, Paige is an absolute wreck, please come home. That text was sent at 7:22. I stared at her words for a long time. Paige is a wreck. My sister, who is 28, still lives with our parents. She is a wedding planner for the wealthy. We had not spoken since July. Why would she be distraught? She couldn't have known about the arrest. I told nobody, but maybe she found out somehow. I continued to scroll. There were more texts from my father. My mother's business partner sent a message asking if I was all right. Even a few co-workers from Secure Solutions had texted. How did so many people learn what happened so fast? I signed the release papers without even reading them and stepped out of the station. The September sun was blindingly bright. The Austin heat felt like a physical wall. The air was heavy and humid, the type that makes you sweat just by being outside. The courthouse steps were mostly deserted. A man smoked a cigarette while a woman shouted into her phone. They were just ordinary people with ordinary lives. The police had let me go, but I did not feel free in the slightest. I opened my phone to place a call. I needed to call my boss. I had to make him understand that my arrest for attempted murder was a terrible mistake. But first, I had to figure out what truly happened last night. I launched my apartment's security application. My login gave me access to the cameras in the hallway and the lobby. The video feed would show if anyone had approached my door. The app loaded painfully slow on the station's poor wireless network. At last, the login page appeared. The last access was at 3:14 in the morning on September 17th, 2024. Then I saw the internet address. My blood ran cold. It was the address of my parents' home in Westlake Hills. Someone had logged into my security system from their house 12 miles away. That was just 4 hours before I was arrested. My hands began to tremble. Wallace and Margaret live at 1847 Westlake Drive. I knew that address by heart. I had installed their entire home network 5 years ago. Someone in my own family had been watching my security cameras in the dead of night. They were either spying on me or they were erasing the evidence. I glanced back at the police station, then looked down at my phone. I saw my father's texts, demanding that I come home. In that instant, it all became perfectly clear. This was not a mistake. This was a setup. My apartment felt wrong the moment I entered. My only safe space now felt like a crime scene. My simple furniture and the big windows that overlooked the lake usually made me feel at peace. Nothing was disturbed, and that was the problem. Everything was precisely where I had left it 2 hours before. That was right before three police officers broke down my door and led me away in handcuffs. The coffee machine was still running. My cold cup of coffee was sitting on the counter. My laptop was open on the table, its screen dark from being in sleep mode. I locked the door and slid every bolt home. I leaned against it, trying to calm my breathing. I had to think clearly. My father expected me at his house in about 6 hours. That gave me 6 hours to understand what was happening, 6 hours to discover who had stolen my identity and framed me for such a horrible crime. I set my phone on the counter and woke up my laptop. The screen lit up instantly. My password was already entered and all my browser tabs were still open from the night before. I could see my work dashboard and the video call with my client from Singapore. A report for a Dallas company was only half done. Everything appeared completely normal, but it was not normal. I opened a new browser to access my personal security system. I had built it myself 3 years ago. The system monitored everything, including motion detectors, door locks, and live video. The entire apartment was secured and encrypted. I searched for the activity logs from last night, September 16th. At 9 in the evening, the front door was locked. My house could prove I was innocent, as the smart home system logged every detail. The video call I was on started at 9:02 in the evening. It finished at 10:14. Soon after, a kitchen sensor went off. I began watching Netflix at 10:47. My bedroom lights switched off at 11:32 and came back on at 6:30 in the morning. All this data provided a perfect alibi that I was home. But the police completely ignored my proof. They were focused only on a driver's license found at the crash site. That driver's license belonged to me. I shut my laptop and walked into the bedroom. My wallet was on the nightstand exactly where I always leave it. I picked it up and looked inside. My credit cards were all there. My work ID was there too, along with a $20 bill, but the slot for my driver's license was empty. The clear plastic window showed nothing. I stared blankly at it. When was the last time I even saw it? I sat on my bed, forcing myself to remember. I hardly ever drive since the traffic in Austin is just awful. My Tesla just collects dust in the garage. I thought I had driven it a few weeks ago, but that was wrong. Then I remembered the gym. My pulse began to race. It was 2 months ago, near the end of July. I had visited a gym in Westlake Hills, close to where my parents live. I was in town for a family gathering, though I could not recall what for. I believe it was a birthday dinner for someone in the family. I remember carrying my gym bag, which had my wallet and workout clothes inside. I stored the bag in a locker before starting a 45-minute class. After my shower, I just left. It did not even cross my mind to check my wallet. I simply tossed it into my bag and drove home. A sinking feeling began to grow in my stomach. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my photos from July. I stopped on a picture from July 21st. It was a photo of my sister Paige and me at my parents' massive house. She was smiling broadly in a white sundress. I was still wearing my gym clothes. The timestamp on the picture read 11:47 in the morning. In the background, my open gym bag sat on a chair, the color completely drained from my face. Paige was right there with me that morning. We had brunch together right after my workout. She had even helped me carry my bags into the house. It would have been so easy for her to slip my license out of my open bag. I collapsed onto my bed, staring at the photo. Paige was my own sister. I knew she could be self-centered and immature, but I never imagined she could be a criminal. She would never steal from me and frame me for a crime. Or would she? I recalled my mother's text from earlier. She had said Paige was a complete mess and I needed to get home. Why was she a mess? I glanced at my phone again, but there were no new texts from Paige. We had not communicated at all since early August. Our final text exchange was about her engagement party. I had explained to her that I would not be able to attend. Her only response was a snarky emoji. That was the last I ever heard from her. For my sister and me, that was not unusual. Paige and I have never been especially close, but this time was different. This felt like a deliberate attack on my entire life. I opened my laptop and pulled up my building's security logs again. At 3:14 in the morning on September 17th, someone accessed my system remotely. The login came from an internet address in Westlake Hills, Texas. That person used a special override code to gain entry. Whoever did it knew the perfect time to check my security logs. They knew I would have an unbreakable alibi for the crime. They knew I would be safe at home, and they still made the call to the police to turn me in. I stood up and slid my phone into my pocket. I was done waiting around for my father to handle this. I decided to drive to Westlake immediately and confront my family about what they had done. The drive to Westlake Hills felt as if I was entering the lion's den. I chose the longer route with the scenic overlooks of the city. The sun was going down, painting the sky in shades of brilliant orange and pink. It was a truly beautiful Texas evening. I just focused on the road ahead. When I finally reached the gate at Westlake, my hands were steady but my heart was pounding. I keyed the access code into the gate's keypad. The code was my birthday, a number we had been using for 15 years. The huge iron gates slowly swung open. The mansion at 1847 Westlake Drive was located at the end of a long private driveway. It was an enormous three-story house with grand white columns and a circular drive. The place looked like it belonged to a family with old money. However, my father had only bought it 12 years ago, after his company became very successful. Every single window in the house was glowing with light. I pulled my car in behind my mother's and sat there for a second. I told myself to just breathe and remain composed. I took one deep breath, grabbed my phone, and stepped out of the car. The front door opened before I even had a chance to knock. My father, Wallace Sutton, stood there in the doorway with his arms folded. He was 61 years old, with perfect silver hair and a crisp navy suit. He said, "I had a feeling you would be showing up soon." Then he added, "We need to have a talk." I walked straight past him without saying a single word. The entry hall looked exactly as I remembered. It still had the same white marble floors and the giant crystal chandelier. A massive painting of the Texas Hill Country hung on the wall. The whole house smelled of lavender and money. My mother Margaret appeared from the kitchen. She looked smaller than I recalled, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a fresh linen blouse. She hurried over to me. "Oh, Reagan, darling, this is all just a nightmare. How are you holding up?" I stepped back just enough to avoid her embrace. "How did you know that I was arrested?" My father's expression immediately hardened. "Gregory gave me a call. Now, why do not you come inside and sit down?" "We need to figure out a strategy," Wallace declared. He spun around and headed into the living room, assuming I would follow him. My mother, Margaret, paused for a beat before she went after him. I remained in the entryway, just looking around. This house never really felt like home to me, not even after all these years. It was always my father's domain, run by his regulations and his wealth. I finally walked into the living room. Wallace was in his huge leather armchair, holding a glass of scotch. That was his personal chair, and no one else was ever allowed to sit in it. Margaret sat on the very edge of the sofa, looking incredibly tense. They both just stared at me as if I was a problem they needed to solve. I chose a chair across from them and folded my arms. Wallace was the first to speak. "Gregory believes the case against you is flimsy. They've only got your driver's license and an anonymous tip. We can beat this." I just looked at him. "An anonymous tip? What kind of tip was it?" My mother's hands were fidgeting in her lap. "Someone dialed 911. They claimed they saw a woman resembling you running away from the accident." I asked, "Who was the person that called?" My father's voice turned sharp. "It was anonymous. That is precisely what that word implies." I looked directly at him. He was lying to me. I could see it in the way he gripped his glass. I could see it in how my mother refused to meet my gaze. They knew exactly who made that call. Before I could challenge him, I heard someone walking from the kitchen. "Reagan?" It was Paige, who was now standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wide and her makeup was streaked from tears. She was wearing a baggy cashmere sweater and yoga pants. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a sloppy bun. It was obvious she had been crying for quite some time. She rushed towards me, ready to give me a hug. I remained perfectly still and made no move to meet her. Paige stopped a few feet away, and her smile faded. "Oh my goodness, are you okay?" Her voice was unsteady. "I am in shock that this is even happening. Jennifer Fisher is a close friend of my wedding planner. This is an absolute disaster." A strange sense of calm washed over me. "So your wedding planner is friends with Jennifer?" Paige blinked a few times. "Well, Austin is not a big city. Everyone pretty much knows everyone, right?" I studied her face carefully. The tears looked genuine. Her eyes were bloodshot and her face was swollen, yet something felt off. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were sharp and direct. She was not having a meltdown. She was performing. "Paige," I said, speaking very slowly, "where were you last night at 9:14?" A sudden silence fell over the room. Wallace slammed his glass down on the end table. "What in the world kind of question is that?" I did not take my eyes off Paige. "It is a simple question. Where were you?" Paige's mouth opened and shut a few times. I I was right here. I was at home with Mom and Dad. We were having dinner." I shifted my gaze to Margaret. "Is that true?" "Yes," she answered immediately, a little too quickly. "Yes, the three of us had dinner together right here." "What did you have for dinner?" Margaret hesitated. "I made a chicken, a whole roasted chicken." "And what time was that?" 7, Wallace cut in. "We had dinner at 7 o'clock. Paige was here for the entire evening." "What exactly are you trying to imply, Reagan?" I slowly pushed myself up out of the chair. Paige took a small step away from me. "I am not suggesting a thing," I said. "I am only asking questions because someone used my license to destroy a woman's life last night. Someone broke into my security system at 3 in the morning from this very house, and someone called 911 to make certain I took the blame." "That is absolutely ridiculous," Wallace began. "Is it?" I stared directly at Paige. "Is it really?" My gaze dropped to her left hand. It was wrapped in a bandage. White gauze was wound around her knuckles and secured with medical tape. "What happened to your hand?" I asked. Paige looked down at it, then quickly hid her hands in the pockets of her sweater. It is nothing. I cut it while I was cooking. When? Yesterday? Was that before or after 9:14? Reagan, that is enough. Wallace was on his feet now, his voice a clap of thunder. You are upset, you are scared, but you will not come into my home and accuse your own sister. I need to use the restroom. The room was completely silent. Upstairs, I said. Wallace's jaw was set like stone. After a very long moment, he gave a short, sharp nod. I left the living room, climbed the familiar staircase, and turned left. But I did not go to the bathroom. I went straight to Paige's bedroom. What I would find inside that room was about to change all of our lives. Paige's old room had not changed at all. The walls were still a pale pink. The air felt thick with entitlement like an expensive perfume. I closed the door silently behind me and stood completely still, listening. Model. I heard Wallace's angry shouting from downstairs, followed by my mother's quiet responses. Then came the soft clink of glasses. It was perfect. They believed I was in the bathroom. I scanned the bedroom. It held a large bed with a crisp white blanket and perfectly placed pillows. Expensive cream serums and jade rollers crowded the makeup vanity. Through a slightly open closet door, I saw rows of designer handbags displayed like art. A laptop sat on a desk by the window. Its screen was black, with only a tiny light glowing to show it was asleep. In 3 quiet steps, I crossed the room and touched the mouse pad. The screen instantly came alive. There was no password, just a bright and clean desktop. The background was a professional engagement photo. Paige smiled at the camera wearing a white lace dress. Her hand rested on the chest of a man in his 30s with dark hair, a fine watch, and a confident look. I did not recognize him. I examined the icons along the bottom of the screen. Safari, messages, Instagram, a calendar, and 7 open web pages. I leaned in to see more clearly. The first few tabs were exactly what you would expect. A wedding venue in Fredericksburg, a Pinterest board named Fall Wedding Ideas. A Saks Fifth Avenue shopping cart held 3 bridesmaid dresses. It was all just normal wedding planning. I was about to shut the laptop, but then I noticed the very last browser tab. It was labeled Private Browsing. My hand froze just above the trackpad. I clicked it. A list of websites appeared on the screen. It was the search history from a private browser session. It looked like one website was still open. A cold feeling spread through me as I read down the list. September 14th, 2024 at 11:47 at night. How to secretly report a hit and run in Austin. September 14th, 2024 at 11:52 at night. Do police believe family member alibis? September 15th, 2024 at 12:03 in the morning. Austin Police Department non-emergency number. September 15th, 2024 at 12:18 in the morning. How long for forensic car analysis? September 16th, 2024 at 3:47 in the afternoon. Can police recover deleted text messages? September 16th, 2024 at 8:52 at night. What is the penalty for leaving an accident scene in Texas? I could only stare at the text. My heart pounded hard in my chest. Paige had researched this for days, long before the crash ever happened. She learned how to report a crime in secret, how to evade the police, and how to set up an innocent person. And on the night of the crash, she did every single one of those things. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and switched on the camera. I took 3 quick photos, one of the whole screen and 2 close-ups of the search history. I closed the web browser and put the laptop back into sleep mode, making the screen go dark once more. I backed away from the desk, my breathing heavy. I knew I needed more evidence. The search history from the internet would not be enough to prove anything. A sharp lawyer would call it simple curiosity. They could argue Paige was just writing a crime story or some other fantasy. I needed something solid. I walked to the vanity and pulled open the top drawer. Inside were makeup brushes, tubes of lipstick, and false eyelashes. In the second drawer, I saw tangled necklaces and a small blue Tiffany box. I opened the third drawer, and my body went still. In the very back, hidden beneath a stack of old birthday cards, was a small black notebook. I lifted it out. The cover was plain and simple. It had no title. It was just an inexpensive spiral notebook, the kind you might use for a grocery list. When I opened it, a wave of sickness hit me. The first page was dated July 29th, 2024. Day 1. Slipped R's license out of her gym bag. She did not notice. I will keep it in my car for the right moment. I flipped the page. Day 18. Studied Austin police procedures. They always arrest the person whose identification is found at the scene. They never doubt an anonymous tip. Day 32. I have found the perfect target. Jennifer Fisher, a detective's wife. This is a very smart choice. Hitting a police officer's wife means they will investigate everything. Reagan will have no way out. Day 47. I did a practice run. I drove past 4th and Elm at 9:15 at night. The street is extremely dark. There are no cameras there. The target walks her dog at that spot at that exact time. Day 60. The engagement party is this weekend. Reagan is not attending. That is perfect. She is already putting distance between herself and the family. That will make it much easier to destroy her entire life. Day 75. There is only 1 week left. I have everything ready, the license, the car, and the full plan. Reagan's perfect little world is about to shatter, and I will finally be the daughter they are proud of. I felt like all the air had been sucked from the room. My vision started to blur at the edges. Paige did not just take my license, she planned this for months. She stalked Jennifer Fisher. She practiced the drive. She researched how to frame me one step at a time, like it was some kind of school assignment. It was as if I was just a problem she needed to solve. I heard footsteps in the hall. I slid the notebook back into the drawer, closed it without a sound, and stood up just as the door swung open. Paige was standing there, and her eyes were filled with suspicion. Reagan, what are you doing in here? I kept my face empty, trying to look tired and overwhelmed. I just needed a minute by myself. This has been a very long day. Paige walked in, her gaze sweeping across the room. She glanced at the desk, the closet, and then the makeup vanity. Why did you choose my room? The other bathroom was occupied, I said. I just needed somewhere quiet. Her eyes lingered on the desk and the laptop for a second. Then she turned back to me. You should probably head home, she said, her voice turning softer. You need to rest. This has been so hard. I simply nodded. Yes, I think you are right. I started for the door, but Paige grabbed my wrist. You believe me, do you not? Her voice trembled as fresh tears welled up in her eyes. That I was here with Mom and Dad. You believe me, right? I glanced down at her hand, at her knuckles. They were covered in fresh scrapes. The skin was raw and red, as if it was just starting to heal. It was the kind of injury an airbag makes when it forces your hands hard against the steering wheel. I looked up and met her eyes directly. Of course I believe you, I told her. You are my sister. A look of pure relief washed over her face, and her grip on my arm loosened. I left her room, walked down the stairs, and went straight past Wallace and Margaret in the living room. I did not bother to say goodbye. I walked out the front door, climbed into my car, and drove away. But I did not go home. I pulled over just 2 blocks away from the house. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I took out my phone. 3 facts were now perfectly clear. First, Paige had researched how to frame a person for a major crime weeks before it happened. Second, she had fresh injuries on her hands that looked like they were from a deployed airbag. And third, my parents were helping her cover it all up. But I still did not have the answer to the biggest question of all. I could not understand why Paige had been planning my ruin for so very long. I did not sleep at all that night. By 6 in the morning, I was sitting in my home office. The light from 3 monitors filled the dark room as I searched for any digital clues I could find. The photos from Paige's room were on the left monitor. I carefully examined the online searches, the dates, and the times. The center screen showed a command terminal, its cursor blinking patiently. On the right monitor, I started building a timeline in a spreadsheet. On July 21st, my driver's license went missing from my gym bag. On July 29th, day one of Paige's journal. From September 14th to the 16th, she was online searching for how to frame someone for a hit and run. The accident happened on September 16th at 9:14 at night. I was taken into custody on September 17th at 6:47 in the morning, but the official version of events had major flaws. A search history and a diary were not going to be enough. I needed solid evidence for a courtroom. I had to find proof that would hold up against the pricey lawyers Wallace would surely hire. I sank back in my chair, sipped my cold coffee, and stared at the ceiling. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. 5 years ago, my mom had me set up their iCloud family plan. She wanted an easy way to share photos and calendars. I spent a whole afternoon linking all their accounts. Because I organized it, I was still the family admin. That meant I had access to their devices. I sat up straight, launched a new browser, and went to the iCloud login page. I entered the family administrator password. The main screen loaded, displaying the 4 accounts of my family members. I selected Paige's name. A list of her devices appeared: an iPhone 14 Pro, a MacBook Pro, and an iPad Air. Each one was currently online. They were all backing up their data. A faint smile crossed my face. Let's see what secrets you've been keeping, little sister. I selected the iPhone backup from 2 days prior, September 16th, the day of the incident. The 6 gigabyte download began. I poured another cup of coffee and waited. The progress bar crept along slowly. It reached 90% and then it was done. I opened the file using a special data recovery tool from my job. The software showed me absolutely everything on her phone. I could see her text messages, photos, application data, call history, and location data. I chose to start with her messages. The program managed to recover several conversations that she had deleted. I clicked on the first one. It was a text exchange between Paige and a number I had never seen before. The area code was 214 from Dallas. I scrolled up to the very start of the conversation. The first text was dated July 15, 2024. It said, I have the item you wanted, $500, Bitcoin only. Paige replied, How do I know it is legitimate? The unknown contact responded, It will scan perfectly. I have used it myself. I never had an issue. The awful truth struck me with force. She had bought a fake ID. I kept on reading. On July 28th, Paige asked if it would work at bars. The seller confirmed it would, but warned her that a single drunk driving incident would ruin everything. My hands gripped the arms of my chair tightly. Drunk driving. She had actually planned to get into an accident while intoxicated. She was going to use my license to escape the consequences. She had even planned ahead by creating a second identity. I snapped a picture of the screen with my phone and saved it to my evidence folder. Next, I examined her financial history. Paige's Venmo was linked to the family iCloud, giving me access to her payments. I went back to the middle of July to the 15th. I discovered a payment of $500 to a user named Alex M. The note on the payment read, Thanks for the referral. I searched for the username and found an Alex Martinez, a 32-year-old man from Dallas. Then, a security program I use for work found his name on the dark web. I saw Alex Martinez's name on dark websites that specialized in fake documents and untraceable phones. This man was a professional, not some amateur. Paige had sent him $500 in a cleverly disguised Venmo payment. I continued my search. I accessed Paige's Coinbase account, which she had connected to our family plan years ago to purchase crypto. I looked through her transaction history. On July 15th, 2024, she purchased $500 worth of Bitcoin. That exact amount was then sent to an anonymous digital wallet. The wallet was untraceable, but the date and time were a perfect match. She acquired the Bitcoin on the very day she paid Alex Martinez. She had been cautious from the start. I added the Coinbase record to my collection of evidence. After that, I checked her credit card statements. The purchases were mostly for ordinary items like makeup, new outfits, and yoga sessions, but a single charge was different. On August 10th, 2024, she paid $200 to a business called Insight Surveillance. A quick search revealed it was a private investigation firm in South Austin known for being expensive and discreet. My heart began to pound. Why would she hire a private detective? Was she spying on me or was she tailing Jennifer Fisher to map out my schedule and build her alibi? I opened another tab in my browser and looked up the company's website. The firm's website offered services for tracking individuals and outlining their daily patterns. They could completely destroy a person's life and make it seem like a tragic accident. I sank into my chair, fighting to catch my breath. This was not a split-second mistake. It was not some desperate act to hide a lie. Paige had been organizing this for 2 months, maybe longer. She bought a fake driver's license. She figured out how to frame me. She hired a private detective. She used cash and cryptocurrency to erase her tracks. She even rehearsed the driving route. She handpicked her victim. She laid it all out like a project plan. My phone buzzed with a message from Wallace, seeing how I was. I did not reply. I could not speak with him yet, not until I had everything I needed. I looked back at the bright screens. The cloud backup was still in progress. I sifted through the files, checking photos and calendar events. That is when I found it. A folder on her tablet was named Private Journal. It was last updated on September 16th, 2024 at 11:32 at night, just before my arrest. My hand trembled as it moved the mouse. I was certain that this journal would confirm my deepest fear. Paige had not only framed me, she had chronicled the entire process, every single step, every decision, and every action she took to ruin my life was inside. I clicked on the folder and started to read. Wait, before I reveal what was in Paige's 90-day plan to destroy me, I want you to predict what happens next. Enter a 1 if you think she acted alone. Enter a 2 if you believe my parents were involved. Or enter a 3 if you feel this story is about to get even crazier. This is not just evidence, this is her entire strategy. Day 1, jealousy. Day 47, victim chosen. Day 89, goodbye to my older sister. She detailed it all so proud and systematic. I should mention that some details have been changed for this telling. This story involves intense betrayal, so you might want to stop listening now. But if you want to find out how my own sister planned my ruin for 3 months, please continue watching. This journal exposes everything. It will make you question what you know about family. I brewed a pot of coffee, expecting a very long night. The journal contained 90 days of her private thoughts. I sat down, opened the document, and began to read. The first entry was dated June 18th, 2024, a full 3 months before the crash. I took a slow breath. Day 1, dinner tonight. Dad would not stop talking about Reagan's promotion. $178,000 a year, Reagan. Reagan is a director at 33. I am so sick of hearing her name. I organize weddings for rich clients, but Dad treats my job like it is nothing. I am tired of living in her shadow. I stared at the words on the screen, totally shocked. It all started with jealousy. Simple, petty jealousy. My career, my income, my existence. That was all it took for her to want to tear me down. I recalled that dinner on June 18th. Wallace had persuaded me to go out and celebrate. Paige was so kind that night. She even hugged me and said how proud she was. But on the inside, she hated me. I kept on reading. Day 15, I have a plan. Reagan is so arrogant about her cybersecurity career. She will never see this coming. First, I have to get her license. Then I have to find the ideal person. It needs to be someone that makes the police so furious that they do not bother to check for an alibi. My hands started to tremble. The ideal person. She had selected Jennifer intentionally. It was no random event, it was a cold, calculated move. For 2 weeks, she had been plotting my destruction. She knew the key was a victim who would make the police too emotional to conduct a real investigation. I continued to scroll. Day 28. Reagan visits the Westlake gym each Wednesday. So predictable. I will bump into her tomorrow. I am going to steal her license when she is in the shower. I shut my eyes. July 12th. I was at the gym on that day. She sent me a text. I am near mom's house. Want to get brunch after your session? That message had made me so incredibly happy. We chatted for a bit, then I showered, leaving my purse open. When I returned, Paige had vanished, and so had my driver's license. I kept reading, my stomach twisting into a knot. Day 35. I have it. Reagan's license is mine now. She has no idea that it is missing. She is so naive. I cannot believe she used that word for me, her own sister. For 30 years, I was the one who protected her. My only mistake was trusting her. I forced my eyes to the next entry. Day 40. I saw Reagan at her favorite coffee shop today. She seemed so very happy. That is not going to last much longer. A cold shiver ran down my back. July 20th, Cosmic Coffee on South Congress. I remember feeling like someone was watching me that day. But when I looked, the street appeared empty. It was not empty at all. Paige was there watching me, plotting my destruction. Day 47. I have found the perfect person. Jennifer, Detective Robert Fisher's wife. She is a pediatric nurse, the perfect innocent victim. She drives home from the hospital on Tuesdays and Thursdays around 9 o'clock at night. Her route takes her right through Lamar and 6th. And here is the best part. When a cop's family member gets hurt, the entire department jumps into action. They will arrest the person whose ID is at the scene of the crime. They will not ask questions until much later. Reagan will have no chance to prove she's innocent. A sickening feeling washed over me. She had chosen a detective's wife with cold and careful thought. She knew the police would act fast on emotion and never check my alibi. She was using the justice system as a weapon against me. I continued reading. The entries grew more detailed, more organized. Day 52. I hired a private investigator in South Austin. I paid $200 to get a full report on Jennifer Fisher's daily routine. It was money well spent. She paid someone to follow Jennifer, just to learn her schedule. This had gone far beyond simple jealousy. This was her mission. Day 60. The engagement party is coming up. Reagan will not be attending. This is perfect. She is already distancing herself from the family. This makes it easier to ruin her. August 10th. I skipped her party. I told everyone I had to work. I thought I was just avoiding a family fight. I had no idea I was playing right into her hands. Day 68. I purchased a fake ID in Dallas for $500 using Bitcoin. It will pass a scan so I can use it if I am pulled over before the main event. Reagan's license will stay clean until the perfect moment. She had a plan for every detail, a fake name, secret payments, and backup plans. This was not a sudden act of anger. This was a carefully planned attack. Day 75. I did a practice run last night. I took Dad's Range Rover through the intersection after having a few drinks at 9:15. I did not see any police cars or cameras. The timing is absolutely perfect. Jennifer drives through at that exact time every night. I had to look away from the screen. My eyes started to burn with tears. She practiced it. She purposely drove drunk to test her plan, to ensure she could escape, and to get the timing exactly right. This was not a terrible mistake. It was not a panicked effort to cover up a crime. It was a rehearsal. On September 2nd, I was at home working that night. Just 12 miles from there, my sister was rehearsing how to demolish my life. I made myself continue reading. Day 82. I told mom about the plan. She cried for a little while, but then dad had a talk with her. He said to her, Reagan has always been so difficult. She always acted like she was better than us. He also said, this whole thing will teach her a lesson in humility. Mom then agreed to make the anonymous 911 call. She would use a disposable phone and claim she saw someone who looked like Reagan running from the scene. The plan was absolutely perfect. I felt something inside me completely shatter. My own mother had given her blessing. She cried, but Wallace convinced her to do it. They both felt that I deserved this. I was a problem because I would not let Wallace control my career. I was a problem for being independent at 25 without his help. For that, he thought some time in prison would finally straighten me out. With my vision clouded by tears, I scrolled down to the final entries. Day 89, September 16th, the night before I was arrested. Everything is set for tomorrow evening. I will hit Jennifer's car at around 9:17. Reagan will be on one of her useless Zoom meetings, a solid alibi that will not matter. I will leave her license on the driver's seat. Mom will call 911 with an anonymous tip. By the next morning, Reagan will be sitting in a jail cell. She will lose her job, her reputation, and her freedom. At last, she will know what it feels like to have nothing, and I will finally be the good daughter, the one dad can be proud of. Goodbye, big sister. I could not breathe. The words on the screen were a total blur. She wanted to destroy me completely, not just to frame me, but to erase my entire life. She planned to take everything I had ever worked for and watch me suffer, and she wrote it all down as if it were a simple to-do list. Goodbye, big sister. It was as if I was already dead to her. I leaned back in my chair, feeling hollowed out. 90 days. It took her 90 days to plan my complete downfall. But there was one more entry from this very morning. September 18th, just hours ago. I clicked it open. Day 90. Reagan is out on bail. She is probably at her apartment this minute, trying to figure everything out. Let her try. Even if she suspects me, she has no proof at all. By the time she finds anything, taking a plea deal will seem like her best option. Mom and dad are handling her lawyer. The plan is working out perfectly. I looked at the time, 6:47 in the morning. That was the very moment I started my own investigation. Paige had no idea I found her journal. She did not know I was in her iCloud account. She did not know I had copies of her searches, her money transfers, her Bitcoin buys, and her texts to the man who made the fake ID. She thought she was safe. She thought the fight was finished. That was about to be her greatest mistake. I closed my laptop and sat in the silence of my apartment. My coffee had gone cold. The sun was higher in the sky, lighting up my apartment, but I hardly noticed. I had the evidence. I had everything. The browser history, the bank statements, the text messages, and a 90-day diary detailing every single step of her plan to frame me for attempted murder. Still, I did not know what to do next. I could not just walk into a police station and show them everything. Paige would claim I made it all up. Wallace would hire expensive lawyers to make the problem go away. Margaret would lie on the stand. On top of that, I found the journal on our shared family iCloud account. It was not illegal, but Palmer would call it hacking. Any attorney would say the evidence was obtained improperly and could not be used in court. I needed more than just the proof. I needed a strategy. I stood up, dumped out the cold coffee, and stared out at the Austin skyline. Somewhere in the city, Paige was living a normal day, planning weddings and texting her friends, pretending to be worried about me. She did not know that I had her diary. She had no idea that I had just spent 6 hours tracing every dollar, every deleted message, and every single lie. She thought I was still lost, still broken, still the trusting older sister she always knew, and she had no idea that I was now hunting her. I needed help. Not from my family's lawyer, but from someone who cared about the truth. I looked at my phone for a moment, then I looked up the number for the Austin Police Department. My thumb hovered over the call button. This single call would change the course of everything. My family would find out I had turned against them. Paige would know I was not a victim anymore. But then I pictured Jennifer Fisher in a hospital bed and her 7-year-old daughter who got a concussion. I remembered the 90 days of planning, 90 days of cold calculation, and 90 days of my sister deciding that my life should be ruined. I pressed the button. The phone rang just twice before an operator picked up. Austin Police Department, how can I help you? I need to speak to the detective on my case, I said. My name is Reagan Sutton. I was arrested 2 days ago for attempted murder. The case number is 47921. There was a brief pause, then the sound of typing. That case is with Detective Bradley, major crimes. Please hold. The line switched to hold music. I stood there waiting, my heart pounding in my chest. Then a man's voice, deep and tired, came on the line. "This is Bradley." I said, "Detective, my name is Reagan Sutton. I am the woman who was arrested for the hit and run involving Jennifer Pfizer. I know who you are, Miss Sutton. This is not the right way to do this. You have to go through your lawyer." "I have evidence that I was framed," I said. "My sister is the one who did it, and I need 1 hour of your time." There was a long silence. Then he spoke. "Your lawyer told me you might try this. Acting desperate is not going to help you in court, Miss Sutton." "I have her journal," I said. "It has 90 days of entries. She wrote down her entire plan, including why she chose your partner's wife as her victim." The silence on the phone seemed to drag on forever this time. When Bradley finally spoke, his tone was harsh. "Be at the station, 2 in the afternoon, and come by yourself." I arrived at the main police station at 1:55 that afternoon. I carried my laptop and a small USB drive containing encrypted files of all my findings. Bradley was waiting for me in the lobby. He was a large man in his late 40s, with graying hair and intense blue eyes that looked like they had seen too much. He wore a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a detective's badge clipped to his belt. He did not extend his hand to greet me. He just said, "This way." He led me through several long corridors to a small interrogation room. The room had no windows, only a metal table, 4 chairs, and a security camera in the corner. He gestured toward a chair. "You have 30 minutes. Convince me." I placed my laptop on the table and opened the journal file. "This is my sister Paige's personal journal. I accessed it legally. I am the administrator for our family's iCloud account, which I set up 5 years ago. My access was never revoked." I turned the laptop around so he could see the screen. "This entry is from day 47, dated July 30th, 2024. Bradley leaned forward, reading the words silently. "I have found the perfect one. Detective Robert Pfizer's wife, Jennifer. She is a pediatric nurse, a completely innocent victim. Her route home from the hospital is the same every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 in the evening, right past Lamar and 6th Street. And here is the brilliant part. When a police officer's relative is harmed, the entire force mobilizes. They will arrest whoever's ID is at the crash site and sort out the details later. Reagan will have no chance to prove her innocence." His face became a mask of stone. He said to me, "Keep going." I navigated to day 89, which was September 16th, the night before I was arrested. Everything is ready for tomorrow night. I will slam into Jennifer's car at around 9:17. Reagan will be on her pointless conference call. It is an ideal alibi that will not matter. I am going to leave her license on the driver's seat. Mom will call 911 with an anonymous tip. By morning, Reagan will be sitting in a jail cell. Bradley read the passage a second time. Then he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "This makes it seem like the entire event was staged. But how do I know you did not just type this up yourself?" I had expected this question. "You can check the file's metadata. The entries were created at the exact dates and times shown. You can also review Paige's device history. She accessed this file the day before the incident. I can even show you the iCloud activity log." I opened another window on the computer, but there is more. Here is a Venmo transaction to someone in Dallas who creates fake identification. A Bitcoin purchase was made on that same day, and I was able to recover text messages about purchasing a driver's license. I turned the laptop back to face him. Bradley leaned in again, his jaw tight. He carefully examined the Venmo history, the Coinbase transaction, and the recovered messages. When he finished, he looked up at me. "You also said you had an alibi we never investigated. Why not?" "Because you arrested me without even asking. I was in a Zoom meeting with a client from Singapore from 9 until 10 that evening. The whole meeting is recorded, time-stamped, and saved in the cloud. I can send you the link right now." Bradley's eyes narrowed. "Why didn't your attorney present this to us?" "Because my father's attorney is not trying to clear my name," I replied. "He is trying to shield Paige from the consequences." Bradley stood up and walked to the far side of the room. He remained there in silence for a few long moments. Finally, he turned back to me. "If this is all true, we are looking at more than a car crash. This is a criminal conspiracy. It involves attempted murder and obstruction of an investigation. Are your parents involved in this?" "My mother placed the anonymous 911 call," I told him. "She was at their house in Westlake Hills, which is a full 8 miles from the crash site. You can confirm it. Just check the cell phone tower data for that call. All the evidence is right there." Bradley simply stared at me. He then pulled out his cell phone and made a call. "Pfizer, it is Bradley. I need you in conference room B." About 2 minutes later, the door opened and Detective Robert Fisher entered. He appeared to be in his early 50s, younger than Bradley, with weary eyes and a wedding ring. He saw me, and his expression immediately hardened. Detective Fisher, I said quietly, I am deeply sorry for what your wife and daughter went through, but I was not responsible, and I have proof. Bradley motioned to the laptop. Red day 47. Fisher leaned over the screen. I watched his face change from confusion to disbelief and finally to pure fury. He read the entire entry twice. He then looked up at Bradley. Is this for real? The file's digital footprint is solid, Bradley confirmed. The cloud backup corresponds. We also have financial records, text messages, and an alibi that we failed to check. Fisher turned to me, his voice shaking with emotion. Your own sister planned this. She went after my wife. Yes, I answered, because she knew it would get an immediate response from the police department. She was counting on all of you being too overcome with emotion to investigate my side of events. Fisher's hands clenched into tight fists. He turned to Bradley. I am officially recusing myself from this case. It is a clear conflict of interest now, but you have to bring her in immediately. Bradley nodded. I agree completely, but we are going to do this strictly by the book. He then looked at me. Miss Sutton, if I move forward with this, it will mean a full investigation into your entire family. Your sister could be charged with attempted murder. Your parents could face charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Are you ready for that? I remembered the words Paige wrote in her journal. Goodbye, big sister. I pictured Jennifer Fisher lying in a hospital bed and I saw her injured 7-year-old daughter. I thought about the 90 days of careful planning, 90 days of resentment, and 90 days she spent plotting my complete downfall. I looked directly at Bradley. I am ready, but I need to ask for one thing before we proceed. Bradley waited. I want to be the one to question Paige for the official record. That evening, Bradley set everything up. I sat across from him in the very same room where I had presented my evidence. I watched as he dialed Paige's number and put the call on speakerphone. My hands rested in my lap, but my heart was racing. This is the strategy Bradley had explained 20 minutes earlier. We are bringing her in as a witness, not a person of interest. She will not feel the need for a lawyer. You will be present as the victim asking for her assistance. She will assume she is there to corroborate your story. And this will be recorded, I had asked, every single word. A two-way mirror with full audio and video recording. If she says anything incriminating, it will be admissible in court. Bradley had leaned in slightly. But Reagan, you cannot coerce a confession from her. No threats, no deals. You simply present the evidence and allow her to talk. Are you able to do that? I had met his gaze directly. I have spent my entire life shielding Paige from the results of her actions. Tomorrow, I will no longer protect her. As the phone rang, Bradley's voice became calm and official. Miss Sutton, this is Detective James Bradley with the Austin Police Department. I am calling in reference to the incident involving Jennifer Fisher. Paige's voice from the speaker sounded cautious. Yes, how can I be of assistance? We understand you are Reagan Sutton's sister. We were hoping you could come to the station tomorrow morning as a witness to help us confirm Reagan's typical routine and her alibi. A brief pause followed. Then Paige's voice softened, filled with what sounded like relief. Of course, I will do whatever I can to help my sister. Reagan is not responsible for this. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning at the central station. You will not need to bring an attorney. This is only for a witness statement. I will be there, Paige assured him. The call ended. Bradley glanced over at me. She sounded relieved. She thinks she is coming here to help you convict me, I said quietly. Good. Let her hold on to that belief until she sees your face. For the next hour, Bradley coached me on interrogation techniques. We sat opposite each other at the table. He took notes on a legal pad while I had my laptop open to Paige's journal. Begin slowly, he instructed. Establish a friendly rapport first, then introduce the evidence piece by piece. Do not reveal everything at once. Let her talk herself into a corner. What if she denies everything? She is going to deny it. Let her. Each lie she tells will make it more difficult to dispute the truth later on. He tapped his notepad. Pay attention to the subtle shifts in her expression. When Paige touches her nose, it means she is lying. If she looks up and to her right, she is inventing a story. If she leans away from you, she is creating distance from her own guilt. And what if she decides to get up and leave? She is not under arrest. So, from a technical standpoint, she is free to go. But people like her enjoy the sound of their own voice. If you provide the chance, she will talk her way into a confession. I nodded, trying to absorb it all. Bradley stood up. Go on home, get some rest if you can. Tomorrow will be an extremely long day. I did not go home right away. I stopped at a coffee shop on South Congress and ordered a black coffee that I left untouched. I just sat there by the window, observing the city at night. I watched couples walking hand in hand and tourists snapping photos near the murals. They were all just ordinary people living their ordinary lives. I recalled Paige as an 8-year-old girl, sobbing after she fell off her bicycle and skinned her knee. I had carried her into the house, cleaned the wound, and applied a colorful bandage. Ray, you will always be around to look after me, won't you? She had asked me then. Always, I had promised her. I recalled Paige at 16 after she was caught shoplifting a designer bracelet from a department store. I convinced the store manager not to involve the police. I paid for the bracelet and our drive home was dead silent. She did not even say she was sorry. I remembered Paige at 23, desperate for $5,000 to cover her rent. I wired her the money on the same day. She never paid it back and I never asked her to. That is what a big sister is supposed to do. They help, they give up things, they love without expecting anything. And for that, Paige had used 90 days to plan how to ruin my life. It was past midnight when I finally got home. I could not fall asleep. I sat at my desk reading her journal again, memorizing every cruel line. Day 47. If I hit a police officer's wife, they will use all their resources. Day 75. I practiced the route last night. Day 89. Goodbye to my dear sister. I stood looking in my bathroom mirror, repeating the words until they felt hollow. Paige, did you grab my driver's license again? Paige, did you grab my driver's license again? By 3 in the morning, I had said it 50 times. By 5, I was staring at the ceiling, just waiting for my alarm to go off. At 6 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was Paige. The police asked me to come down this morning and give a statement for you. I feel so nervous. What do I say? I just stared at the message. She was asking for my guidance. She wanted me to help her destroy myself. I carefully typed my reply. Just tell the truth, Paige. It is the only thing we can do. I hit send. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, and then popped up again. Then her message came through. Okay, I love you, sis. I set my phone down and closed my eyes. In just 3 hours, Paige would walk into the Austin Police Department thinking she was about to save her own skin. She had no clue she was stepping directly into a trap. And I, her sister, was the one who set it. I arrived at the station at 8:30 in the morning. Bradley met me in the hallway outside the interview room. This room was different. It was smaller, with a metal table bolted to the floor and a chair on either side. A camera was mounted in the corner. A massive two-way mirror took up most of a wall. Fisher is behind that glass, Bradley said in a low voice. He wants to witness this himself. I gave a small nod. The audio and video are being recorded. I will get her when she shows up. You should already be seated. I will introduce you as the victim, here to finally clear your name. I will explain that you requested to speak with her personally. After that, I will leave you two alone. And what if she wants to know why I am here? Just tell her you wanted to thank her for supporting your story. Put her at ease. I glanced at the big two-way mirror. I knew Fisher was on the other side, watching and waiting. He was waiting for the person who had harmed his wife to come in and confess. What if she denies everything? I asked. Bradley's face turned grim. Then we will have to build the case the slow and hard way. We would get warrants and process all the forensic evidence, but a confession makes this much faster, he pointed out. And then she will be ours, I said, finishing his thought. Totally and completely ours. At 5 minutes before 9 in the morning, a call came over the detective's radio. Our person of interest is in the lobby now. He looked at me. Are you prepared for this? My thoughts replayed the last 90 days. I pictured Jennifer Fisher lying in that hospital bed. I remembered the text message Paige sent just this morning, the one that said, I love you, sis. I sat down in the chair that faced the door and said with confidence, I am ready. The room seemed much colder than I had anticipated, or maybe that coldness was just coming from me. I sat completely still. My hands were neatly folded on the table in front of me. My eyes were fixed on the door. At exactly 9 o'clock, the door opened. Officer Stevens led Paige into the room. He was the officer who had arrested me only 3 days ago. Paige was wearing a cream-colored sweater, jeans, and flat shoes. Her hair was pulled back into a flawless ponytail. She looked so composed, as if she were meeting a friend for lunch, not coming in for questioning. And then her eyes met mine. All the color drained from her face. Reagan. Her voice trembled. They said I was only here to give a witness statement. My voice was quiet but firm. Sit down, Paige. She hesitated and glanced at the officer. He motioned toward the empty chair across from me. Then he stepped out and shut the door behind him. Paige lowered herself into the chair. Her eyes shifted from me to the mirror and then back to me. What is happening? Should you not have your lawyer here? I just looked at her. I said, this is not about me anymore. Today is all about you. Paige gave a shaky laugh. So, what did the detective share with you? He is trying to uncover the truth, and my job is to help him find it. Her gaze darted back to the mirror. I do not get it. You will, very soon. I placed a folder on the table between us. I pulled out the top sheet of paper. It showed a photo of her internet search history. I slid it over to her. Paige, on August 20th, did you look up how to report a hit and run without giving your name? She just stared at the printout. The blood drained from her face once more. That is from my computer. Where did you get that? Please just answer the question, Paige. Her mouth was slightly open. I believe I was researching that for a client. As a wedding planner, I look up unusual things all the time. I slid another paper in her direction. So, what about this search? Do the police verify alibis for family members? Was that also for a client's special day? Paige's hands clutched the table's edge. You looked through my personal computer. That is against the law. I only viewed our shared family cloud storage. As the account administrator, I can legally see everything. Paige's jaw grew tense, but she said nothing. I leaned a little closer. Paige, did you take my driver's license? She stayed quiet for a few seconds. No. Why would I do something like that? Let us talk about July 12th. It was a Wednesday morning. You were at the Lifetime Fitness Center in Westlake. I was just seeing Mom. She lives very close to there. You were there because I am there every Wednesday. You knew my schedule. I pushed a third paper across the table. It was a log from the gym. It proved we both checked in only 15 minutes apart. I had to step away for a work call, leaving my locker open for about 5 minutes. When I came back, my license was gone. Paige glanced at the gym sign-in sheet. That does not prove anything at all. Paige, where is your driver's license right now? Her hand drifted toward her handbag. I gave her a warning. Do not even try. I am aware you have your own license because the one they discovered in the Range Rover was mine. Paige's hand froze in midair. She held her purse in a tight grip. Her fingers were trembling. For the very first time, she seemed genuinely terrified. This is not possible. Reagan, you are framing me. I am your own sister. Are you really? I cut her off. My voice was quiet but incredibly sharp. A good sister would not scheme for 3 months to put me in jail. Paige became completely still. What are you talking about? I reached into my folder one last time. I brought out her personal journal. I had printed every entry from the last 90 days. I highlighted all the important dates and passages. I laid the pages on the table one after the other. I felt like a card player showing a winning hand. Paige's eyes widened with pure astonishment. What is all of this? Let me tell you a short story, Paige. This one is called Day One: How I Planned to Destroy My Sister. I held up the first page and started reading out loud. Day 1, June 18th. We all had dinner this evening. Dad just kept bragging about Reagan's recent promotion. $78,000 a year. Reagan, the director, at 33. All I heard was Reagan this and Reagan that. I am so sick of her name. I plan events worth millions, but Dad acts like I am unemployed. I am done being second place. My sister Paige believed her scheme was completely flawless, but she did not anticipate this. Her initial move was to obtain my driver's license. After she had it, she went looking for the perfect target. She required a victim who would make the police so angry that they would not waste time checking for an alibi. Paige just kept shaking her head. Stop it, she begged. Where did you get that information? I informed her it was all from her journal. Day 28, July 11th. Reagan goes to the gym in Westlake each Wednesday. She is so predictable. I will just go there tomorrow. I will take her license right out of her locker while she is in the shower. I glanced up from the paper. You saw me at the gym that day, Paige. You actually gave me a hug. You said that you missed me, and then you went and stole my license. I did not do it, she insisted. Day 35, July 18th, it was a success. I am holding Reagan's license right now. She has not even noticed that it is gone yet. She is so completely clueless. My voice shook on that last word, but I continued on. Day 47, July 30th. I have identified the target. It is Detective Robert Fisher's wife, Jennifer. She works as a pediatric nurse, the most sympathetic victim imaginable. And here is the genius part. When an officer's family member gets hurt, the entire department reacts emotionally. They will immediately arrest the person whose identification is found at the scene and sort it all out later. Reagan will not have a chance to prove her innocence. Paige was breathing hard. You illegally accessed my private journal. A judge will never allow that in court. Day 75, September 2nd. I did a test run tonight. I drove Dad's Range Rover drunk through the intersection at 9:15. I did not see any patrol cars or any cameras. The timing is absolutely perfect. I put the page down and just looked at her. You did a practice run, Paige. You drove drunk deliberately to ensure you could succeed. Tears were now streaming down her cheeks, but I had more to share. Day 82, September 9th. I informed Mom of my plan. She did not support it initially, but Dad convinced her. He said this would teach Reagan a valuable lesson in humility. Mom then consented to make the anonymous 911 call herself. Paige's voice cracked. Reagan, please do not read any more of this. Day 89, September 16th. Tomorrow is the night. I have everything ready. I will slam into Jennifer's car around 9:17. I will make sure Reagan's license is on the front seat. Mom will phone 911 and make an anonymous tip. By tomorrow morning, Reagan will be in a jail cell. She will be stripped of her job, her reputation, and her liberty. She will finally know how it feels to have absolutely nothing, and I will be the number one daughter. Farewell, my dear sister. I set the final page on the table. The only thing you could hear in the room was Paige's ragged breathing. She stared at the pile of pages, her hands shaking uncontrollably. I can explain all of this, she whispered. Can you, though? I leaned back in my seat. Because I am waiting, Paige. Explain how you dedicated 90 days to ruining my life. Explain how you followed Jennifer Fisher. Explain how you practiced driving intoxicated just to hit her car at the precise time. Explain why you chose a detective's wife. You were counting on the police being too furious to check my alibi. Paige opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. On the other side of that one-way mirror, I knew Detective Bradley was watching, capturing every sound, every look, every single lie Paige told, and every truth she was about to spill. Just tell me, I said softly. Explain what you did. Before Paige confesses, what is your guess? Is she responsible? In the next 60 seconds, she is going to completely break. The journal, the web searches, the denials, it is all about to spill out. And when she screams the words, I wanted you to suffer, it will guarantee her conviction. Please remember this story is fictional and created for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people or situations is purely coincidental. But if you want to hear the exact moment my sister's jealousy brings her down, stay right where you are. This is the confession that will change our lives forever. Paige's mouth opened, then it shut, then it opened again. I did not do any of it. Her voice was barely a whisper. Her hands were trembling. You have no idea what those searches were about. I was gathering information for a blog I have on true crime cases. I am a big fan of podcasts. Paige, my voice was perfectly calm. Your journal. Explain your journal to me. Her entire face began to fall apart. You read my personal files. That is illegal, Reagan. You can never use that against me. It is a shared family computer account, I stated, and it is completely lawful. I was the one who set the whole thing up. I have had access for the last 5 years. You accepted the terms of service when Mom created it. But those are my personal thoughts. Her voice grew louder and more frantic. You cannot use my thoughts. They were just fantasies. I did not actually. I pushed the final piece of evidence across the table. It was a crime scene photograph of the Range Rover, a big, black, luxury car. The entire front end was crushed inwards. The airbags had all gone off. This vehicle is registered to Dad's company. You are authorized to drive it. The collision happened at 9:17 at night. My video call at work was recorded from 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock. I was not behind the wheel. I looked her directly in the eye, but you were. Paige stared at the picture, and her breathing became shallow and fast. She jumped out of her chair, which scraped loudly against the floor. You think you are so smart? Her voice was now dripping with venom. I remained perfectly still. Paige brought both hands down hard on the table. You were always the golden child. It was constantly Reagan this and Reagan that. Reagan's perfect grades, Reagan's amazing career, Reagan's flawless life. So you decided to destroy it? I asked her gently. Yes, she shrieked as tears carved lines through her foundation. I wanted you to feel pain. I wanted you to finally understand what it is like to lose everything, to be a complete nobody. I leaned forward just an inch. Did you select Jennifer Fisher for a particular reason? Paige let out a wild, terrifying laugh. I could not care less if that detective's wife lived or died. She was just a tiny, unlucky piece of the puzzle. This was always about you, about making you suffer for being so much better than me. The room went quiet. Paige was struggling for breath, her chest rising and falling quickly. I kept my voice completely steady. So you are admitting it. You caused the collision. You left my license there. You tried to frame me for the entire crime. All the color vanished from Paige's face. She finally realized what she had just done. Wait, no, that is not what I was trying to say. I knocked on the one-way mirror 2 times. The door opened instantly. Detective Bradley came into the room holding a set of handcuffs. Paige pushed her chair back from the table. No, please, you need to wait. Bradley spoke in a formal, professional tone. Paige Sutton, you are now under arrest for the crime of attempted murder and for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. He moved to stand directly behind her. She stared at me, her eyes wide with pure terror. Reagan, you need to help me. I am your sister. Bradley fastened her hands behind her back. The steel handcuffs clicked shut with a sharp sound. I stood up, walked right up to her, and looked straight into her eyes. You stopped being my sister 90 days ago. Bradley recited her legal rights as he led her from the room. You have the right to stay silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. The detective read my sister her rights as she screamed out my name. Reagan, Reagan, I am so, so sorry. And then the door closed and I was left alone in the quiet room. All of my evidence was spread out before me. The picture of the car, the internet searches, the gym's schedule. It had taken me 3 full days to discover everything, 3 days to build a case that would destroy my sister's life just as she had planned to destroy mine. I thought I would feel relief, but I just felt empty. I was about to find out a terrible truth. My sister had done this before and her victim was still paying the price. The door opened again and Detective Bradley returned. He looked completely worn out. He said that I had done an excellent job. He told me her confession was very clear and would be easy to use in court. I just nodded. I could not find my voice. Bradley took the seat across from me. He told me that since Paige was a flight risk and a threat, she would not be granted bail. The district attorney was going to charge her with attempted murder, assault, and several other felonies. She was looking at a minimum of 20 years behind bars. I finally found the words to ask about my parents. He said they were being brought in for questioning this afternoon. My mother was the one who made the fake emergency call, and my father assisted her in the planning. Phone records showed my mother was 8 miles from the crash when it happened, at 9:24 that night. She made the call from the Westlake area, exactly where I thought she would be. I squeezed my eyes shut. Bradley went on saying that Jennifer, the wife of the intended target, was in stable condition and was expected to recover. Her daughter Emma had a concussion but was going to be fine. Both of them were willing to testify against Paige. He paused for a moment, then looked right at me. You saved both of them, Reagan. Paige was never going to give up. People like that never know when to stop. I looked back at him. She will not stop even if she is in a prison cell. Bradley's face grew very serious. Then we will do everything in our power to make sure she stays there for a long, long time. As he got up to go, he turned back to me. He said that when they looked into Paige's history, something strange came up. It was an old case from 2 years prior that involved a woman named Rachel Murphy. She was accused of stealing $85,000 from her company. A single false accusation ruined her life. She lost her career, her reputation, and everything she had worked for. Now she was working 3 different jobs just to make ends meet. A sick feeling started to grow in my stomach. I asked what that had to do with my sister. Bradley explained that Rachel and Paige had been co workers. The evidence that was used against Rachel had been completely fabricated. Someone had planted it, and the one who claimed to have discovered the theft was my sister Paige. The room started to feel like it was spinning. Paige framed her. He confirmed that was their theory. Rachel always maintained her innocence, but the investigation stalled. Bradley put a business card on the table in front of me. The name Rachel Murphy was printed on it. She was living in East Austin and working at a coffee shop. He suggested that I should go and speak with her. The moment he was gone, I picked up the card. 2 years ago, my sister had ruined this woman's life. While she was taking 90 days to plan my downfall, she had already rehearsed it on somebody else. By noon, Paige was sitting in a jail cell. By 1 in the afternoon, my parents were at the police station. By 2 o'clock, I was back in my apartment staring at the evidence I was never meant to see. Bradley had called me about 30 minutes earlier. He let me know my parents had hired an attorney for all 3 of them. That lawyer was already fighting to get Paige's confession thrown out. I told him she gave it willingly. He said that the lawyer was going to challenge it anyway. Then Bradley suggested a new lead. He mentioned an old case from 2 years back involving Rachel Murphy. He was convinced I needed to look. If Paige had a history, it meant she had a pattern. It would prove she was a predator who had done this before. After our call, I went to my laptop. Bradley's words haunted me. People like her do not start with something so big, they escalate. I logged into our family cloud and scrolled back, past 2023, into the files of 2022. And there it was, an old iPad backup from June of 2022. When I opened it, I found photos, notes, and a file called Private Journal. A cold feeling washed over me. There was another victim. The journal had 30 entries. I started reading. The entry for June 18th said the office adored Rachel Murphy and her designs, and Paige hated it. She wrote that Rachel had to disappear. I read on. A note from June 25th outlined a plan to frame Rachel for stealing company money. On July 20th, she confessed she had copied Rachel's password when her desk was unlocked. The last journal entry was dated August 15th. Paige detailed how she planned to destroy Rachel that very day. Her scheme was to move $85,000 from a customer's account into a hidden one using Rachel's own login information. She was confident Rachel would be fired or possibly even face charges. Then Paige would take her place as the lead coordinator. Reading this made me feel sick to my stomach. She had ruined another woman's life 2 years before she came after me. I immediately searched for Rachel Murphy's name on the internet. The first result was a news story from August 17th, 2022. It reported that an event manager, Rachel Murphy, was charged with stealing $85,000. The article claimed the evidence against the 28-year-old was massive, but Murphy maintained her innocence, saying she was set up. A follow-up piece in November said the charges were dismissed due to issues with the electronic proof. But the damage was permanent. Rachel Murphy's professional life was over. She was unable to get another job in her industry. Online, Rachel's profile photo was bright and confident, but her summary revealed a desperate truth. The words simply said she was looking for a new role. Her previous job ended in August of 2022. A 2-year gap haunted her work history. She had been searching for any job at all, but her last message was half a year old. Then, nothing. Public records gave me her location. She lived in a small studio in East Austin, a place that costs around $800 a month. This was the kind of apartment you rent when your world has crumbled. Paige had systematically ruined this woman's life with a cold and precise strategy. For 2 whole years, Rachel never knew the real source of her misery. I got on the phone with Bradley right away. I have the proof. I explained that Paige had done this to Rachel Murphy 2 years before. He asked me to send him all the information. This history of her behavior would build a powerful case against Paige. It proved her attacks were deliberate and that she was a continuing threat. I needed to see Rachel in person. She had a right to know who had wrecked her life. Bradley warned me to be cautious. I replied that if Paige set her up, Rachel would crave justice as much as I did. When the call ended, I took my keys and left. Her building was run down, nothing like the glowing woman in her old pictures. At 6 in the evening, I knocked on apartment 2B. I could hear movement before the door cracked open, held by a security chain. A weary, painfully thin woman peered out. Her eyes were sunken with dark circles, aging her far beyond 30 years. "What do you want?" she asked. "My name is Reagan Sutton," I began. "2 years ago, my sister Paige ruined your life. 3 days ago, she tried to ruin mine. I think we should talk." Rachel released the chain and opened the door. Her apartment was incredibly small, maybe 400 square feet, yet it was perfectly clean. It was a space designed for getting by, not for thriving. A futon was her sofa and also her bed. The kitchen was just a hot plate and a small refrigerator. There was no television, just a laptop on a little table next to a pile of bills. Rachel motioned for me to sit on the futon. She began to offer coffee, then caught herself. We both understood it was something she could not spare. I sat as she remained standing, her eyes full of distrust. "You said your sister destroyed my life, Paige Sutton. I do remember her. We were colleagues at Premier Austin events 2 years back." "I know," I said. "You need to look at this." I pulled up the 2022 journal file on my computer and turned it to face her. This is Paige's private diary from June to August of that year. She wrote down everything. Rachel's hands trembled as she began to read. The color vanished from her face. On the first day, she wrote about me. "Rachel Murphy thinks she is superior to everyone else." She kept scrolling. Day 15, "I have a strategy to get Rachel dismissed." Day 25, "I know Rachel's computer password." Her voice shook. Day 30, "I will use Rachel's account to transfer $85,000. Oh my goodness, she recorded every move. She orchestrated the entire thing, the same way she did with me, I said quietly. Rachel collapsed on the futon beside me, her gaze glued to the laptop. I told them all it was not me. My supervisor, the authorities, my own mother and father, no one believed me. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. How could they? The proof was perfect. My account, the transaction records, my password, my own computer. "I believe you," I told her. Rachel let out a sharp breath. She dried her face with her hand. "Tell me the whole story," I urged, "everything that happened." Rachel inhaled deeply. 2 years ago, I managed events for Premier Austin events. I was excellent at my job. Within a single quarter, I brought in 3 major clients for big events. My supervisor was thinking about promoting me to senior manager. She paused. Paige joined the company 6 months after me. She seemed nice initially, but soon she grew extremely competitive. She would try to take every client I secured. She would tear down my ideas in front of management. She made everything a contest that I never wanted to enter. Rachel tightened her jaw. Then that August, $85,000 vanished from a client's funds. The entire digital trail pointed directly to my account. The money went to some offshore account I had never heard of. I was fired that same day. The company filed criminal charges against me. I spent my entire savings on an attorney. "What happened with the case?" I asked. "The evidence was overwhelming," Rachel said. "My lawyer convinced the district attorney to dismiss the case if I returned the money and resigned. but my professional life was finished. Everyone in the Austin events industry heard the story. That accusation showed up on every background screening. I sent out 200 resumes. I got 2 interviews and no offers. She motioned to her small room. For 2 years, I have delivered meals just to afford this place. My parents disowned me. They told me I disgraced our family. Her voice became a faint whisper. I lost everything, my career, my savings, my own family, and it was all her fault. I saw myself in her, the same person I had been 3 days earlier, accused, arrested, and utterly alone. But Rachel had no way to clear her name. She suffered the consequences for 2 years while Paige just moved on to her next target, me. Rachel, I said, I can prove Paige did it. Her admission is right in this journal, and because of what she tried with me, we can get your case looked at again. Rachel's eyes widened. Look at it again after all this time. It shows a clear pattern of conduct, I clarified. Paige framed you in 2022. She tried to frame me in 2024. Her method is identical. Take someone's identity, do something illegal, plant the proof, destroy their life. When we show this history to the district attorney, they will see she does this repeatedly. She is a hunter. Rachel was completely shocked. If we prove it, can I get my life back? I cannot be sure, I said truthfully, but we absolutely have to try. Rachel was silent for a minute. Then she covered her face with her hands. When she looked up, her whole face had transformed. The exhaustion was there, but a different emotion had surfaced. It was resolve. What do you need me to do? She asked. Be at the police headquarters tomorrow morning, I told her. You need to make a formal report. Explain what happened in 2022. I will provide the journal. Detective Bradley is on my case. He will listen to your story and see how it matches Paige's own words. Do you think they will listen to me now? Rachel asked. Her voice was a fragile blend of hope and dread. They will listen, I promised her. This situation is new because Paige has confessed to framing someone else. No one can claim you are making things up. You are the second victim in her criminal history. Rachel slowly nodded her head. Okay, I will go. There is one more thing, I said. Once this is public, Paige's lawyers will come after you. They will say you want revenge or are trying to gain from my situation. They will try to ruin whatever is left of your name. Rachel's expression hardened. Let them. I have lived with this disgrace for 2 long years. This time I will fight back. I stood and extended my hand to her. We will face this as a team. Rachel rose and took my hand. Her grip was firm. As a team. When I left her apartment, my phone buzzed as I walked to my car. It was Detective Bradley. Reagan, there is an issue. Wallace and Margaret paid Paige's bail. It was $500,000. She has been released. My stomach dropped. When was this? About 20 minutes ago. Her attorney argued she was not a danger and had deep connections here. I recalled a line from Paige's journal, day 90. Even if Reagan suspects me, she has no proof. But Paige did not know I had her diary. She did not know I had located Rachel, and she was completely unaware of what was coming next. Bradley, I said, make sure Rachel Murphy is there tomorrow, and I must talk to the district attorney. We are not filing one charge against Paige. We are filing two. Our goal was to prove she had done this before. The next 3 days were a blur of police meetings, evidence checks, and watching the prosecutor build a case that would send Paige away for good. On the morning of Friday, September 20th, Rachel and I sat across from Detective Bradley and District Attorney Patricia Monroe. We were in a meeting room at the Travis County District Attorney's office. Monroe was 58, her silver hair in a tight bun with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. She had run major cases in Austin for 2 decades. Bradley said she was a bulldog. That was what we needed. Rachel explained her experience, giving every single detail. The envy, the stolen login, the missing $85,000, and all the false electronic clues Paige created. Login records, fund movements, and fake bills. Her voice was steady, but I noticed her hands were shaking. She described being fired, the police coming to her house, and her parents disowning her. Monroe heard her out without a single interruption. She did not write anything down. Her face was a mask. She just watched Rachel like a scientist planning how to win over a jury. After Rachel finished, Monroe leaned back in her chair. The leather creaked in the silent room. Why did you not say you were set up at the time? Rachel's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I tried. Nobody believed me. The evidence was simply too much to deny. I pushed the 2022 journal toward her. This changes everything. Monroe read the entries silently. Her face showed no emotion, but I saw her jaw clench. Her eyes moved across the page, absorbing every calculated detail Paige had documented. When she finally looked up, her expression was hard as stone. This was calculated from the beginning. Mrs. Murphy, we are reopening your case. Rachel gasped, tears of relief flooding her eyes. Thank you. Monroe did not smile. She simply closed the journal and returned it to me. We'll need the original and all the digital evidence you have. On Saturday, September 21st, the district attorney established a command center for the case. A massive whiteboard dominated one wall, split into two timelines, one in blue, one in red, for 2022 and Rachel Murphy, jealousy in June, a stolen password in July. In August, $85,000 vanish and Rachel is framed. For 2024 and Reagan Sutton, the same jealousy in June, a stolen license in July. In September, an attempted murder and Reagan is framed. Monroe stood observing the board with her arms crossed. It is the exact same method. This is her signature move. Bradley agreed. We can prosecute for a pattern of criminal behavior. The sentence will be significantly harsher. I want everything, Monroe ordered. Every journal page, every financial record, and every single witness you can locate. I displayed on my laptop all the proof I had found that week. There were two separate journals, one for 2022 and another for 2024. They detailed 90 days of my sister's scheme against me and 30 days against Rachel. I presented the money trail, including Bitcoin transactions, payments for fake documents, and funds wired to Rachel's overseas accounts. The digital proof was just as damning, with browser histories, recovered text messages, cloud files, and login data. I also provided them with a list of witnesses. It included Rachel Murphy and Jennifer Fisher as soon as she was well enough to speak. Emma Fisher's name was also there for a child appropriate statement about the crash. I even included Officer Kyle Stevens, the man who arrested me. The Uber driver who saw the Range Rover speed away was on the list as well. Monroe's assistant was an astute young man named Vincent Shaw. He carefully took notes on a legal pad. He looked to be about 30 years old, wearing a perfectly fitted suit that reflected his sharp intellect. He remained silent, but I could practically see him constructing the case for a jury in his mind. When I finished, Monroe glanced at Bradley. How solid is the confession from 2024? It is airtight, Bradley confirmed. She gave it freely, with no coercion. Paige just crumbled during the interview. She confessed to it all on camera. Her exact words were, I wanted her to be in pain. I did not care if the officer's wife died. A slight smile touched Monroe's face. Perfect. We are going to hold her accountable for this. On Sunday, September 22nd, Monroe summoned us to her office again. Rachel sat beside me while Bradley stood near the door. Monroe had a thick file on her desk. She opened it. This is the official list of charges against Paige Sutton. Then she started to read. For the crimes in 2024, she is charged with 2 counts of attempted murder against Jennifer and Emma Pfizer. The charges were a string of serious felonies: aggravated assault using a dangerous weapon, fleeing the scene of a crash, child endangerment. There was also identity theft and obstructing the course of justice. Monroe flipped the page. The offenses from 2022 were just as serious: embezzlement of $85,000, wire fraud, identity theft against Rachel Murphy, and computer fraud. She moved to another page. We have also added charges for engaging in organized criminal enterprise. Monroe finally looked at me. With this evidence, Paige faces 25 to 30 years in state prison. She will be ineligible for parole for a minimum of 15 years. The gravity of that sentence hung in the air. If Paige ever got out, she would be in her 50s. The room felt heavy, and I heard Rachel draw a sharp breath next to me. What is going to happen to my parents? I asked, my own voice sounding distant and strange. Monroe's businesslike demeanor softened just a fraction. Wallace and Margaret have separate charges, she clarified. They are looking at conspiracy, filing a false report, and faking a 911 call. They might get probation if they testify against Paige, and if they refuse, she let the question hang. In that case, they could face 2 to 5 years each. I gave a slow nod. They had made their own choices. Monroe shut the folder. The arraignment is this Monday at 9 in the morning. Paige will make her plea. I can guarantee she is going to plead not guilty. After we left her office, we started preparing for the trial. Monroe addressed us both. I will need both of you to be witnesses. Rachel and I glanced at each other, and she nodded with resolve. We will be there. The moment we stepped out of the district attorney's building, the afternoon heat was suffocating. It was still 95 degrees in Austin, and you could see shimmering waves rising from the pavement. The air smelled thick with hot asphalt and car exhaust. Rachel and I walked to the parking garage in complete silence. We did not speak until we reached my car. She finally looked at me. Reagan, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I have to thank you for having faith in me, for defending me. I looked at this woman whose entire life my sister had tried to destroy. At that moment, something shifted inside of me. This was not just about clearing my own name anymore, it was about making certain Paige could never ruin another life. This is not finished, I told her. On Monday, Paige is going to plead not guilty. That is where the difficult part starts. Rachel nodded. I am prepared. But I kept my biggest worry to myself. I was petrified because Paige was out on bail. She was fully aware that I was the one who reported her. She knew about her journals, about Rachel, and the entire case built against her. Paige Sutton had absolutely nothing left to lose, and a person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person of all. I recalled what she had written on day 90. She has no evidence, but that was no longer true, and Paige knew I possessed all of it. This meant she would either disappear or she would come after me, and I could not decide which was worse. On Monday morning, September 25th, I took a seat in the public area of the Travis County Courthouse. I was there to see my sister plead not guilty to 14 separate criminal counts. The courtroom was packed. News reporters filled the back rows, scribbling in their notepads. On the prosecution side, I saw Jennifer Fisher's family. My own parents sat directly behind Paige with their attorney seated between them. But I was there completely alone. Paige entered the courtroom in a tasteful cream-colored dress and heels, not a prisoner's jumpsuit. She was still a free woman. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Catherine Walsh, looked down from her elevated bench. Paige Sutton, you face 14 counts, she began. 2 counts of attempted murder, aggravated assault, a felony hit and run, child endangerment, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. The list just kept going. Embezzlement, wire fraud, computer fraud, and assuming the identity of Rachel Murphy. To finish it all, there was organized criminal activity. It took a full 30 seconds for the judge to read every charge. Each one felt like a punch to my gut. How do you plead? Paige's voice was clear and strong. Not guilty, Your Honor. A chilling sense of dread washed over me. She was going to fight this with every resource she had. District Attorney Monroe got to her feet. Your Honor, the state requests that her bail be revoked. The defendant poses a significant threat to the witnesses, particularly her sister, Reagan Sutton. A man named Gregory Palmer stood up. Your Honor, my client has complied with all her bail conditions. She has no intention of running. She is a respected member of this community with no prior trouble. Judge Walsh studied Paige for a long time. Bail will continue, but Miss Sutton, you are ordered to have no communication with Reagan Sutton or Rachel Murphy. If you disregard this order, you will be sent straight to jail. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. The trial date is set for December 2nd, 2024. Court is adjourned. The judge's gavel struck with a sharp sound. I stood up and tried to blend into the crowd as it filed out. But in the corridor, I ran right into them. Paige, Wallace, and Margaret were huddled with their lawyer, already scheming. Wallace noticed me and began to walk toward me. Reagan, we need to discuss this as a family. I did not stop walking. I have nothing to discuss with you. My mother's voice trembled. Please, sweetheart. Paige made a mistake. She is your sister. Those words made me stop cold. I turned and faced them all. She tried to frame me for a crime that could have sent me to prison for 10 years. That is not a mistake. That is a calculated act of pure evil. Paige stepped toward me, her eyes like chips of ice. You will be sorry for this, Reagan. You are the one who is tearing this family apart. I did not tear it apart, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You did. 90 days ago. A sheriff's deputy moved between us. Miss Sutton, you must obey the no-contact order. You need to step away from her, now. Paige gave me one last long stare before she turned and walked away with our parents. I stood there in the marble hall, watching them leave. In that instant, I knew I could never look at them as my family again. The following 3 weeks were a whirlwind of trial preparations. The first week, I was with Monroe's team every single day. They taught me how to behave on the witness stand, only answer the specific question asked. Do not volunteer any extra information. The defense will paint you as a bitter person, so you must stay composed. We went over the evidence for hours. We listened to the recording I made on the night of the crime. We analyzed the journal pages, now covered in colored highlights and notes. We traced the financial path of every last dollar Paige had stolen. It was every single puzzle piece I had worked so hard to find. Then, during the second week, Jennifer Fisher came home from the hospital. 6 weeks after the crash, she was finally able to walk and talk well enough to give her testimony. Monroe set up a meeting for us. In person, Jennifer seemed much more fragile than she did in her photographs. Her left arm was in a sling, but her eyes were clear and determined. Thank you, she said softly, for uncovering the truth of what really happened. I was at a loss for words. I am so terribly sorry that you and your daughter went through this. It was not your doing. She reached out with her good hand and gently squeezed mine. You put a stop to her. That is what is important. Her daughter, Emma Fisher, who was only 7 years old, was still too traumatized to appear in court. To protect Emma, Monroe had her testimony recorded on video. She sat in a comfortable room while a trauma specialist asked her questions in a gentle voice. I was only able to bring myself to watch that recording one time. I watched that small girl talk about the collision, the airbag, and her mother's screams. I could not watch it again. In the third week, Palmer started filing motions to suppress evidence. First, he argued the journals were a violation of privacy. Judge Walsh rejected it, stating my access to the family cloud was legal. Next, he attempted to have all the iCloud evidence thrown out. That motion was rejected as well. After that, Rachel gave her official statement. I watched from behind a one-way mirror as she recounted her story in a calm and unwavering voice. She recalled the details from 2022 flawlessly. Palmer's assistant questioned her for 2 hours, searching for any inconsistency in her story, but she never once faltered. On October 15th, Monroe called our last meeting before the trial would start. She advised me that I could be on the witness stand for 4 to 6 hours. Palmer will try to destroy your credibility. He is going to claim you fabricated the journals because you were jealous. You must stay absolutely calm. I assured her that I would. He will claim your access to the cloud account was a form of illegal hacking. We are both aware that is not true, but his aim is to create doubt in the minds of the jury. You have to be a solid, unbreakable rock. I nodded that I understood. Monroe leaned back in her chair. Reagan, for 20 years I have sent people like her to prison. In my entire career, I have never seen a criminal chronicle their offenses like this. Most of them try to cover up their actions. Paige wrote about her deeds as if she was proud of them. This gives us our biggest strength. Her own writing is going to be what convicts her. What if the jury questions if the journals are real? That is the moment we showed them her video confession. We have Paige on camera, admitting she wanted to see me suffer. She confessed that she did not care if the other crash victim lived or died. You just cannot fake that level of pure hatred. Monroe got to her feet. Try to get some sleep. The trial will begin on Monday, December 2nd at 9 in the morning. We will make sure she can never harm anyone else. The night before the trial, I could not sleep a wink. I just stared out at the city lights, picturing Paige's smug expression. She honestly thought she would get away with everything. Palmer's strategy was obvious. He was going to attack my character and paint me as a spiteful sister who made it all up. Yet there was one critical piece of evidence that he could never explain away. It was the clear sound of Paige's voice in that video confession. I had watched that video repeatedly to brace myself for court. Each time I heard Paige scream that she wanted me to suffer, my own determination grew stronger. Tomorrow, 12 strangers would hear that very confession. They would see her journals in her own handwriting. They would listen to Jennifer Fisher's testimony. They would hear Rachel Murphy describe 2 years of agony. Finally, they would hear my story about how I uncovered the truth one painful step at a time. My sister's entire life was at stake, a decision between 30 years behind bars or total freedom. The trial of Paige Sutton began on a cold Monday, December 2nd, 2024. Those 5 days felt like a lifetime. The courtroom was at full capacity every day. Journalists, victim advocates, and curious locals from Austin filled the benches. I sat in the prosecution's front row with Rachel at my side. Across from us, our parents, Wallace and Margaret, sat behind Paige and her lawyer. Our eyes never once met. Judge Catherine Walsh was presiding, just as stern as she had been at the first hearing. The jury was composed of 12 people. There were 7 women and 5 men, with ages from their early 20s to their late 60s. These ordinary people now held my sister's destiny. The district attorney, Monroe, rose to give his opening statement. He told a story of bitter jealousy, meticulous planning, and complete devastation. Paige Sutton spent 3 months framing her sister for a crime she did not commit. 2 years before that, she had already destroyed another woman's life without any hesitation. Monroe stated this reveals her pattern. She is a predator who fixates on successful women out of pure jealousy and ruins them without a shred of remorse. The evidence will demonstrate that Paige Sutton is guilty of all charges. Next, her lawyer Palmer stood, looking confident and poised. He presented this as a family argument that had gotten out of hand. He suggested that Reagan Sutton, as a tech expert, had both the motive and the skill to forge digital evidence. He alleged that I had illegally accessed my sister's private accounts and created this story to avoid my own legal problems. The defense will create reasonable doubt, which is all we need. If that doubt is there, you must acquit her. On the second day, I took the witness stand. Monroe had me detail the entire timeline from my arrest and the stolen license to the investigation and the journals. My testimony lasted for 4 hours. Then Palmer got up to start his cross examination. He asked, Miss Sutton, do you admit to reading your sister's private journal without her consent? I corrected him, saying I accessed a shared family cloud account that I have legal authority over. He shot back, how convenient that you chanced upon evidence of your sister's crimes. I calmly replied that the journals are in Page's own hand. Digital records verify the date of every entry. I did not invent any of it. He pushed, you have a background in cybersecurity. You could have altered that data. I said I did not. He retorted, but you were able to. I looked straight at the jury. I was able to, but I did not do it. The forensic report proves that I am telling the truth. Palmer questioned me for a full hour, but he could not break me. On day 3, it was Rachel's opportunity to testify. She told her story. The frame up in 2022, the stolen password, the $85,000. She described being bankrupt and unemployed for 2 agonizing years. Her voice was strong the whole time. Palmer only questioned her for 30 minutes. He could not rattle her either. Jennifer Fisher was the next to take the stand. She looked thinner and more reserved, but her spirit was unbroken. She spoke about the car crash, the violent impact, and waking up in a hospital. Her daughter had a concussion. Then she discovered the crash was intentional. I believed it was just an accident, she said, until I found out it was all planned. I was the objective because my husband is a detective. My daughter and I were just in the way. Her voice caught on the final word, and 2 jurors quickly dabbed at their eyes. Day 4 was for the confession video. Monroe stood. Your Honor, the prosecution presents Exhibit 47, the interrogation of Paige Sutton from September 19, 2024. Palmer objected instantly, claiming the confession was coerced. Judge Walsh overruled him. The defendant was not under arrest. She was a witness in an interview, so Miranda warnings were not applicable. The confession is admitted. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. A large screen at the front lit up. I saw Paige on the screen inside that same interview room. The video began midway through our conversation, with my voice sounding calm and detached. Did you have a specific reason for targeting Jennifer Fisher? Paige's voice filled with rage. I did not care if that police officer's wife died. She was just in my way. This was always about you. The courtroom held its breath in a thick silence. A juror gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Another man on the jury leaned away, a look of pure revulsion on his face. The video showed Paige's furious scream. I needed you to hurt. I needed you to understand the pain of losing everything you cherish. Then, the realization of what she just admitted washed over her. The color drained from her face. No, that is not what I meant to say. The screen went dark as the courtroom lights returned. Paige stared down at the table, her hands trembling, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Palmer jumped to his feet to do damage control. Your Honor, my client was under incredible distress. Monroe quickly countered, that confession was not coerced. Miss Sutton had that outburst entirely on her own. She was not prompted or threatened. She spoke her truth and the jury heard it themselves. Judge Walsh gave a slight nod. Please proceed. On the 5th day, it was time for closing statements. Monroe faced the jury directly. You have read her journals detailing a 90-day plan. You have heard her confess, I wanted her to suffer. You have reviewed all the proof. 2 victims, 2 separate schemes, 1 culprit. Paige Sutton is guilty, and she must be held accountable by the law. Palmer stood for his final appeal. He spoke of reasonable doubt. That is all you need. Can you be absolutely sure those journals were not altered? That her confession was not manipulated out of her? If there is any doubt in your mind, your verdict must be not guilty. The jury filed out of the room at 2:15 in the afternoon. Rachel and I stood waiting in the hall where the tension was almost unbearable. Bradley joined us, resting against the wall. How long will this take? Rachel asked in a low voice. It could be a few hours or it could be several days. I had no answer to give her. At 6:30 in the evening, an officer appeared. The jury has returned. Their decision took only 4 hours. We filed back into the courtroom to our places. Paige was frozen like a statue between her lawyers. Wallace and Margaret seemed to have aged 10 years in just 5 days. Judge Walsh came into the room. We all rose to our feet and then sat again. Has the jury come to a verdict? The foreman, a man in his 50s with gray hair, stood up. Yes, Your Honor, we have. In the matter of the attempted murder of Jennifer Fisher, how do you find? Guilty. Margaret let out a small, choked sound. The foreman continued reading from the paper. Attempted murder of Emma Fisher. Guilty. Assault with a deadly weapon. Guilty. felony hit and run, guilty endangering a child, guilty identity theft of Reagan Sutton, guilty obstruction of justice, guilty. He went through all 14 charges. Every single time the word was the same: guilty, guilty, guilty. Paige's controlled expression finally broke. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the table. Palmer rested a hand on her shoulder, but she gave no sign of noticing. Judge Walsh's voice broke the silence. Miss Sutton, you are guilty on all counts. Sentencing will take place on December 20th in 2 weeks. Take the defendant into custody. Two deputies moved toward Paige. She got to her feet on unsteady legs. They secured her hands in cuffs behind her back. As they walked her to a side door, she spun around and locked eyes with me. The fight in her was completely gone. All that remained was a profound emptiness. Her lips began to move, shaping words. I could not hear them over the noise, but I could read them clearly. I hate you. I offered no reply. There was nothing more to say. The door clicked shut behind her. Paige was gone. December 20th, 2024 arrived as sentencing day. The courtroom seemed colder than before, or perhaps that was just the finality of it all sinking in. 2 weeks had gone by since the verdict. Paige sat at the table in an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed. The fancy clothes and the entire act were finished. Gregory Palmer was beside her, but he had nothing left to argue. Judge Catherine Walsh looked down from her bench. Before I pass sentence, the court will hear from the victims. Jennifer Fisher went first. Her voice was steady, though her hands held the podium tightly. My daughter Emma is 7. She still wakes up screaming every single night from nightmares. The sound of a car horn fills her with terror. Paige Sutton did more than hit our car. She destroyed the peace and safety of our family. My husband Robert is a detective. He sees the worst of humanity, but he was not prepared to find his own family bleeding in a wreck. Paige Sutton does not merit any compassion, as she showed us none. Rachel Murphy was the next to speak. She was noticeably thinner than she had been 9 months ago, but her posture was straight and proud. 2 years ago, Paige Sutton demolished my career, my reputation, and my family bonds. She stole my life from me. For 2 years, I believed I was to blame, that I had made some unforgivable error. But I did nothing wrong. Paige ruined my life out of simple jealousy. Your Honor, she must be stopped. If she is released, she will find someone else to destroy. Then it was my turn. I approached the podium and addressed Judge Walsh, avoiding any glance at Paige. Paige is my sister. I spent my life protecting her, and she repaid me by trying to send me to prison for 10 years. But this is no longer about me. This is about ensuring Paige cannot ruin another person's life. Your Honor, I ask you to impose the maximum sentence allowed by law. Judge Walsh then looked straight at Paige. Miss Sutton, would you please rise? Paige stood, the sound of her chains a soft rattle in the quiet room. The judge's voice was firm and cold. I have reviewed all the evidence, the reports, and the victim statements. Your actions were not a simple mistake. They were deliberate, meticulously planned, and incredibly cruel. You documented your 90-day plot to destroy your sister in a journal. Before that, you ruined Rachel Murphy's life for no reason other than envy. She paused for a moment. You have displayed a complete lack of remorse. Your confession was not filled with regret, but with rage. The law allows for enhanced sentences in cases with a clear pattern of criminal behavior. I intend to apply those enhancements now. For the charges of attempted murder, you are sentenced to 15 years for each count, to be served one after the other. For the fraud and embezzlement against Rachel Murphy, I sentence you to an additional 8 years. Combined with the other sentences, your total term is 30 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. You will not be eligible for parole for a minimum of 15 years. Paige's legs buckled beneath her. In the gallery, our mother, Margaret, let out a heart-wrenching sob. Wallace was motionless, his face a mask of shock. Judge Walsh's gavel struck the wood with one final sharp crack. Bailiff, take the defendant away. Two deputies gripped Paige by the arms and led her out. This time, she did not look back, and I felt nothing at all. Not happiness, not relief, just a deep, hollow feeling. It was over. 9 months later, in September of 2025, my life was completely transformed for the better. I finally felt like myself again. I saw my smile reflected in the window of my new office at Secure Net Solutions. My title was Director of Cybersecurity Architecture, earning $230,000 annually, a large raise from $178,000. I used last year's $52,000 bonus for two important purposes. First, I established a $100,000 fund for Emma Fisher's college education and her therapy. Second, I paid $214,000 to eliminate all of Jennifer Fisher's remaining medical debt. The thank you card she sent me sits on my desk. It says I rescued her family twice, first from Paige and then from financial ruin. Not far away, Rachel Murphy now has her own office. I brought her on 6 months ago as our senior event coordinator, and her record is now clear. The district attorney formally expunged her charges the day after Paige's sentence. Rachel has already saved $25,000. She found a new apartment in South Congress and is repairing her relationship with her parents. Just last week, she was promoted to lead event strategist. She once believed her professional life was over. I told her that she earned every bit of this new success. Jennifer and Emma are healing. Jennifer has returned to work at Dell Children's Hospital. Emma attends therapy twice a week and the nightmares are becoming less frequent. She is now a second grader who has new friends and smiles much more. 3 months ago, Robert Fisher phoned to express his gratitude. I simply said I was happy they were okay. He insisted they were okay because of me. Wallace and Margaret pleaded guilty to obstructing justice. They each received 2 years of probation, community service, and $80,000 fines. Their large Westlake home sold for $3.1 million. After more than $600,000 in legal fees, they now reside in a small condo in North Austin. I visit them once a year for Thanksgiving. The encounters are always strained, polite, and very distant. We never mention Paige. She is at a women's prison in Gatesville, Texas, a drive of about 2 hours. 4 months ago, a short letter arrived with just 3 lines. It read, "I am sorry. I was wrong." The final line was a plea for me to write back. I threw the letter away. I felt no hatred toward her. I just felt an emptiness, which is so much worse. Right now, I am sitting with Rachel at a cafe on 2nd Street. The warm September sun streams through the window. Rachel is beaming about her recent promotion to senior event strategist. I said she deserved every bit of it. She took my hand across the table and squeezed it gently. She told me she had never really thanked me for having faith in her, for giving her life back. I told her we rescued each other. We raised our coffee mugs for a little toast. A reminder for a meeting in 20 minutes popped up on Rachel's phone. I told her to run along and that I would take care of the bill. She gave me a hug and asked about getting dinner soon, and I agreed. I sat for a bit longer, watching the city of Austin go by. Only a year ago, I was facing charges for something I did not do. My own sister tried to ruin my life, but she overlooked one key thing. I am Reagan Sutton. I fix things for a living. The hardest case I ever cracked was my own family. My phone vibrated with a message from a new customer. A Dallas logistics firm needed help with a data breach. I put some cash on the table and stepped out into the beautiful September afternoon. I was free at last. I was not just free from the lawsuit, but also from relatives who never cared for me. And for the first time ever, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. For everyone tuning in, please listen closely. I was fortunate to have the skills to uncover the facts, the power to protect myself, and the bravery to pick justice over blood. There were 3 moments where I could have quit. First, after I found the journal entry. Second, after I saw Rachel's terrible pain. And the third, when her video confession was shown to the whole court. But I pushed forward because some battles are worth the ultimate risk. In hindsight, I have no regrets about revealing what Paige did. My only regret is that I missed the red flags sooner. Her envy was always simmering beneath her drive to be the best. She never took responsibility for her own failures. When a relative betrays you, it is not dramatic like in the movies. It builds up silently, disguised as a simple rivalry. Then suddenly, you are arrested because your sister set you up. I hope you can learn from what happened to me. Do not wait for a false accusation to realize that family sabotage is not fiction. It is very real and it can break you. So here is my warning. Trust your intuition, always. If a family member makes you feel worthless, envious, or afraid, you have to draw a line to keep yourself safe, even if you are related. Being betrayed by someone you care about is the worst kind of hurt. They have your passwords, know your routine, and understand all your vulnerabilities. If they turn that against you, you might not be able to bounce back. I almost was not able to. This entire ordeal taught me that family ties do not guarantee trust. It proved that the very people you would die for might be the ones plotting your downfall. So, if my story resonated with you, I would love to read your thoughts below. Has anyone ever broken your trust in a terrible way? Please pass this story on to someone who might need to see it, and I hope you will subscribe. The stories I will tell next will explore even more about the shadows in people's hearts. I appreciate you staying with me to the end. I should also mention that stories here can sometimes have fictional elements to help teach a lesson. If this type of material is not what you are looking for, I invite you to check out my other videos. Please take care of yourselves.